Hello and welcome back to wearefree.tv. Today we're going to have a very special and interesting episode. I'm going to talk to Pamela Palmer, who is my guest today. She's a mother, human rights activist, and an entrepreneur. The name of this episode is Mother's Battle Against Government Child Trafficking. I'm going to have a conversation with Pamela, who's also a survivor of government human trafficking, and the mum who helps others escape. So, hello Pamela, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So, wow, we have so much to talk about, and I guess we just start at the beginning. And I understand that when you were born, you were taken from your parents and you were adopted by another family. So, as a child growing up, what were you initially told was the reason for being adopted?
Well, the problem with the adoption machine, it's an industry, and it's a money-making industry. A lot of people make money off of it. I was only 5 days old when I was taken, and the propaganda is, don't ask questions, for one. It's an insult to the family that has adopted you. You're lucky that they have taken you. You're lucky because they chose you. They didn't just have you. Like, mothers that give birth are worthless in compared to adoptive parents. They're the real special ones. They're not glorified parents. So, don't insult them by asking questions. Your history is not important. What is important is where you are now. It's very, it's propaganda. It's propaganda. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so resistant to it, because it was literally shoved down my throat from
by your
such a young
parents,
age.
by your adopted parents.
Oh yeah.
So,
My adoptive parents, it was, the whole system is about that, like, you're so lucky your mom loves you. There was a poem on my wall as a child that said, Pamela, not flesh of my flesh nor bone of my bone, but still miraculously my own. You didn't grow under my heart, but more importantly in it.
Wow.
So that was on my wall my entire childhood. When I left home, I did not take that poem with me because it was there as a reminder. Don't ask questions.
Yeah.
Don't ask about your mother. Don't ask about your medical history. Don't ask about where you came from. Don't ask about your roots. None of those things are important. Your life begins here.
Yes. Now, further on, it's going to become clear why that's the case and why are you encouraged by the parents to believe that. Now, are we saying that the parents are actually part of the whole issue with the trafficking? I mean, are they aware that you were trafficked to them?
No, that's the other thing. They're not aware. They're given these pamphlets. They're given these books. For example, the one that was read to me as a child is Why Was I Adopted?
Yep.
And again, it's all about the parents and how great they are. The adoption industry makes martyrs, makes saints out of them, And I'm sorry to say, I'm a mom. I've given birth to my own children. Just because someone can't give birth doesn't give them the automatic right to someone else's child.
Of course.
You know what I mean? But that's what the adoption industry drives. It's like, oh, you can't have your own children. That's okay. There's other babies out there that we can find you. Like, we can get another baby for you. We can get a baby for you from someone else. And it's like, whoa. So people don't think about the mom, but the parents most of them are just as innocent. They don't realize the ones that are outside of the system that, they really do want a child. And I get that. I get that there are a lot of people that just innocently do want a child, but this is what they're told in a lot of ways. Like, it's only been recent that open adoption has been a thing. But even then, the system doesn't like them.
I'm trying to understand one thing. So the system is actually lying to them as well, because the system is telling them that the child is legitimate and the mother, the child was given, I guess, by its biological mother. And they are doing a good thing and they're helping that mother. Whereas in reality, which we're going to discuss in a moment, the children are being kidnapped and given to those parents. So why do they need to be brainwashed to believe that they are such saints and that they're doing such a good thing and that the child shouldn't question anything? Why is it? What does that serve?
I mean, well, it raises us better. It stops us from going and finding our roots, finding our families, reconnecting them, and then we can't come back and fight.
And because if you did,
So that's what it's about. Now, I also want to explain there's also another side of adoption where parents do know, and those are the ones that are involved in the foster care system. Okay, there is especially in the United States, there is an actual tax benefit to adopting children, and they actually get money for adopting children. And so there are parents that actually adopt children not because they want these children and because they have barren wounds, but because it's financially better for them. So not all of them are innocent. A lot of them are, not all of them. There are some of them that are fully aware and adopt these kids because it's a financial benefit to them, just like it is the system. Every child that the system gets adopted, they get a government bonus.
Sure, but well, not but I'm thinking the parents who get paid for adopting might also not be aware that the child has actually been kidnapped.
Not in my experience. No, well, yeah, no, not in my experience, because a lot of them, they know who the parents are. They know the parents are fighting extremely hard to get their children back. Just they're lifted up to be convinced that they're the privileged ones. You know what I mean? So no, they're terrible people and they don't deserve their children, but you do. You know, and so they're given these big, massive heads. And that's a dangerous situation to put a child into.
Fair enough.
You know, a very dangerous situation. A lot of children you would not believe that are adopted actually are murdered. Nothing is done. I know mothers myself. Their firstborn children were murdered.
But what's the logic?
By their adopted families.
But why would they do that? You mean they just get the money and murder the child?
Basically, they abuse them. Yeah, there's a case that came out just the other day. I can't think of. There's a reality show, okay, and the parents, the adoptive parents, actually murdered their toddler. Okay, so now they're not playing the last season because of it. They've now been charged with the murder of their adopted child, and the system is refusing to talk to the biological family.
I see.
Refusing. They won't contact them, even though it's public. It's all over U.S. media. It's all over Canada media. I have it shared on my Facebook. Nothing will come of that.
And why won't they contact them? What's the logic behind that?
Well, you're now considered the illegitimate ones. Your child has been adopted. They owe you nothing. You know, nothing. And people have this false sense, like, you know, yes, there's a court system that you go through, and so society is convinced that you had a chance. You had a chance before a judge. You had a chance to go through all these things, so you should have been able to get your child back. They don't realize how you're set up.
Yeah, I understand. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Okay.
We will. Yeah.
It's like we're building the logic as we go along, because I've spoken to you earlier, and it's kind of very deep and complex. But we're going to get there. Yes. So I'm trying to do it slowly. So what about your mother? So what can you tell me about your biological mother?
Well, I was told by the time I was 10 that my real mother was a prostitute. She tried to kill me in her stomach and I was going to turn out just like her. That's what I was told by the time I was 10 years old. Now, like most children, you know, you get angry at your parents and you want to run away to your grandma's house and you're packing up the wagon and you're going to walk down the street, right? Like it's your first attempt at independence or whatever, or making a stand for yourself. I was flat out told, go right ahead. Nobody's going to take you. Your family begins and ends with us. If you don't accept us, if you don't accept our abuse, if you don't accept our whatever, no one else is going to take you in. You have no aunts, you have no uncles, you have no family without us. That's very traumatic as a child. It still bothers me. Because I loved a lot of those people. And to think that their love ended if I said no to my mom and if I said no to my dad, that was very hard to swallow, but it was true. I mean, it was unfortunately very true with a lot of them. Not all of them, but with a lot of them it did. It began and ended with my mom. So I was told she was a prostitute and that I would be just like her.
Yep.
So in a way, that was kind of a good thing.
And how old was your mom?
Even though I left her really young.
Well, you were told, how old were you told that your mother was when she gave you up?
10. Oh, I wasn't told how old she was. I wasn't told the real story. But by the time I was 10 years old, I was convinced my mother was a prostitute.
And what was the real story?
And that's how she got pregnant. Yeah, that's the official story that I was told.
But what is the real story?
You're going to turn out just like her.
But what's the real story?
The real story is my mother was 17.
Okay.
And she was unmarried. And that was unacceptable.
Uh-huh.
And so society back then, I was born in the 70s. I was born in 76. And so back then it wasn't okay for a young mother to have a child who wasn't wed and all that sort of stuff. So it was a forced adoption. And I don't have all the information because I could only get my non-identifying information. It's a little bit tricky getting your actual information, even though they've so-called opened up the adoptions now. It's still very tricky to get that information out of them.
I see.
So I can only go by my senses, and my senses just immediately, when I was reading through that one page of a few little things, I knew everything they told me was absolutely wrong.
What did you read?
And I bet you anything my mom wanted me.
So what did you read? What was written there?
I read that my real name at birth was Jennifer. Excuse me, was Jennifer. And that really struck me because for a mom that was a prostitute that tried to kill me while I was in her stomach, why would I have a name? You know, why would she name me? Right? Like that was my first thing, that, okay, that's not true, because if she didn't want me, if she wanted me dead, why would she give me a name? And so she did. She gave me a name. I was in the paper. It also said that she was 17 years of age when I was born. And funny enough, I was the same age when I had my first child. I was 17.
Okay.
So that made me immediately feel like connected to her, like, oh, wow, I know what that was like. I know, even though it was different times and it was technically okay by the time I had my first child, for me to have my first child at that age, you know, it's still, it immediately like, okay, I know what that felt like. And I can see my mother not wanting to kill me, you know. Yep. And again, that was really prominent. That was coming through so hard. And then unfortunately, the third thing that was on there is that there was no health history and no information about my father. My father was removed from my birth certificate.
And again, why is that done? I understand it's a common practice with the traffickers or whoever, or the system behind them, to remove the father from the birth certificate. Now, what does that serve?
It makes it easier for them to traffic us. They don't have to get permission from the father. All they have to do is drug the mother, lie to the mother, coerce the mother, threaten the mother. You know, they can use any tactics that they want. And once they get that mother to go along with it, that's it. The buck ends there.
So where is
There's
the father?
No father
How could they remove the father?
I have no idea.
And the father over here is not interested because...
It's no. See, and that's the other thing too. They want to tell you that. They want to convince you of that. But in most cases, the fathers were not even told. I do a lot of advocacy work. I'm connected with not just adoptees, but also a lot of parents who had their children taken. And you would not believe the amount of fathers that know they have children out there. They have no idea where to find them. They didn't find out until years and years and years later. And most of them are absolutely devastated.
And what's the story that's being told to them? So the wife goes to, I mean, I can imagine both of them go to hospital to give birth, or wherever people give birth, and the father waits outside, and then the child is born, and the father is told, sorry, your child's gone. And what does he?
No,
he just goes, okay, and leaves?
Taken completely.
Sorry?
No, they don't even tell the father. They don't even tell the father that she's pregnant. Or they tell her right away that she's pregnant, and then they make her disappear. That's what maternity homes were for. It's actually where they got the name maternity wards from. It's from maternity homes, because it was bad to lock up women in maternity homes. But that's what they would do. They would send them away because they were a disgrace. They would put them into these maternity homes. There's the Salvation Army had a hospital in Ottawa, Canada, which is the capital of Canada. that had an entire hospital wing that was just single pregnant women. Now that, of course, has since been shut down. But
I see. So
it was big business. It was either
we have
through the church.
Before we go into the history, because I'm trying to slowly build up the understanding of the logic. Yeah, fine. So what we understand is that they don't just go for any mother or any baby. They target ideally a single mother, then the father is nowhere to be seen. So there's no problem to removing from the birth certificate because he's not even there to create any problems or issues with that. So that's clear.
Yeah.
Then they target.
Most of the times too, they would guilt and scare and use scare tactics on the father. Like, look at what you've done. Now you've shamed our daughter. We're going to have to take her. And a lot of them actually think that they had abortions.
I see. So either a weak father who is not interested in the birth because he's also young and she's young, or they're both junkie. No, not junkies actually, because you're saying that these people are actually fit to raise kids, but yet their kids are being taken away from them just because of weaknesses that are being used against them, like poverty,
vulnerability.
Sorry, vulnerability. Yeah. Exactly.
Vulnerability.
So let's think like the traffickers. So we want to target someone, ideally a single parent, a single mother, no father, less problems. Then how weaker or vulnerable, what other vulnerabilities we would like the mother to have for her to be ideal for us to snatch her baby, apart from being a single mother? Young, I guess young, like under 20 or something?
Young.
Okay.
Young, poor.
Yep.
No family ties. So adopted people like me are perfect targets because we have no real family. Our history has been erased. Immigrants as well. Basically people that are on their own.
Okay.
And that's actually a lot of child charities that you see out there. The ones that are actually involved in trafficking never mention families. They always child, because that's their thing, is just getting the child.
Yep.
Removing them from the family, and then they can move them.
I see. So now we're getting somewhere. So now somebody that watched this far and says, okay, I'm starting to get what you're saying here. So you're saying that there's an industry, there's a child trafficking industry that makes millions, billions from trafficking kids. And it's like almost institutionalized. It's like it's not an underground, undercover thing. It's an institutionalized practice, which we're going to go into the history of in a moment. Now, it makes sense because it's not cheap to adopt. We know that to adopt a child is like $50,000 or something. I don't know how much it costs. Tens of thousands of dollars to do that. So it is quite a profitable thing. And all you need to do is find a cheap product, which would be what you just described, vulnerable mothers. And then there's loads of money to be made. So, okay, we understand the business logic behind this. Now let's go into the history of this. And again, we want the viewers to follow us and understand that this is all legal, or I don't know if it's legal, but it's institutionalized, and it's like one of the practices that almost seem part of the system. And there's special courts for this that support it, and laws. And let's go into the history. So the history is this. I understand, before we talk about the history, that today, one more thing, a child, the history of trafficking, Mr. Kelso, the 1800s and all that, please.
Yes. There was a journalist in Toronto. This actually, the entire child trafficking legalized government child trafficking ring actually began in Toronto, Canada, back in 1893. And by 1896, it was completely privatized, and it was government funded, okay? But privatized, which is important. It's a private corporation, okay? Very easy to exploit, just like these private charities. Very easy to infiltrate.
What's it called again?
And exploit. The Children's Aid Society.
The Children's Aid Society. Okay. Aiding the children.
It's known,
aiding the children.
CAS.
Helping the children.
Exactly. And no, exactly. Now, I honestly completely can empathize and agree with what a lot of J.J. Kelso saw. And I believe his intentions were true. I really do. What he described seeing was children on the street begging. Their parents were drunk and basically neglecting them. Now, let me explain something too. Children were not the precious gifts that we're told that they are today. Okay? They were property. They're chattels. Under the law, they are still chattels. They are equal to cars. They were also under the same act as animals. So the act is like what governs the laws, for example, for animals, for pets. Children and pets were under the same act. They were held in the same shelters. So he was offended by that. And again, I agree with that. Dogs and cats and children should not be homed in the same animal shelters, in the same cages stacked on top one of each other, which is exactly how they were.
Yep.
So he was highly offended by that. And so he lobbied the provincial government in order to give him jurisdiction separate from the animal shelter to be able to house children. And they gave him that. That was fine. So it worked.
When you say they
Now,
gave
in
him that,
Canada,
what exactly do you mean they gave him that? Who gave him what?
They gave him permission. They gave him
who did?
permission, and they gave him the funding
Who?
to open these. J.J. Kelso, the
No, but
provincial
who gave him
government
that?
did. The provincial government of Ontario.
The provincial government of Ontario. What's that? I mean, is that different
Ontario
to the general government of the whole of Canada?
Yes.
It's like a local government,
Yes.
like a council?
There's federal government, and then there's provincial government. And provincial government is basically different territories of Canada.
Okay.
And so
But
the
is
way
that,
that the laws
is that
are
just local? But other provinces have had different laws and they were not given that? Unlike
Yes.
Ontario?
They followed suit. They ended up spreading Canada-wide, okay? But originally, it only began just in Ontario.
Okay.
And once they were able to get the whole...
and who are they?
The setup, basically, then they spread Canada-wide, and then they spread worldwide.
Okay, so, but at this part of the story, at this stage, it's all innocent. It's still good. It wasn't exploited by them, the traffickers, because that was just Kelso doing a good thing. He wanted to separate the kids from the cats and the dogs and the animals and the cages and just put them in other places more humane, which was all good intentions. And they gave it to him with good intentions. And then what?
Yes. And then what happened was Kelso innocently. Now, in Canada, the laws are separate. Criminal code, okay, is criminal. It's under police, okay? That's federal jurisdiction. If you want to get a criminal law changed, and everything is covered under the criminal law as far as children goes. So if you fail to provide for them, if you neglect them, if you abuse them, okay, all of those laws are covered under the criminal code. The police can arrest you and they can put you in prison. You get a trial, the whole bit, okay? Now, he felt back in the 1890s that the police were ineffective, that they were not doing their jobs. But instead of him going to the feds and asking them for permission, he went to the provincial government.
Instead of going where? To the Fed? To the federal government?
He went to the provincial government.
But why was that a mistake?
Because the provincial government in Canada does not have jurisdiction over federal laws. That's federal jurisdiction. Only the feds are allowed to take these laws and make any changes whatsoever.
So had he gone there, had he gone to the federal, he would have said to them, look,
legal.
He would have said to them, I'm trying to understand, he would have said to them, look, guys, there's a law here that says that a parent has to take care of their child. And if they don't, it's criminal. It's a criminal offense. You know, the parent could be prosecuted and thrown into jail for not taking care of their child. That's the law. Now, he went to them. Had he gone to them, what would he have said to them? Enforce it?
Well, he would have basically said to them, they're not doing their jobs. Make them do their jobs or give me the power to do their jobs.
Which would be what? Would be to prosecute the inadequate mothers.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So instead of doing that...
And that would have been the legal way. Now, our Constitution would have stopped it, though, okay? Because they're not allowed to give those things away, all right? There's an entire system. There's due process. There's all of these protections that you have under the law. So he wouldn't have been able to get away with it, okay? So he didn't go there. Instead,
but when we get
the
away,
way
they
that the
wouldn't have said, go away to him. You're not the government, you're just a citizen.
Exactly.
You can't come and tell us that we're not doing our job and you're going to do it for us. It's ridiculous. So
you can't be a police officer.
Yeah.
You're not a police
Yeah,
officer.
join the police
So
and
we're not giving you police power.
Yeah.
Right.
So what did he do?
And so what he did was instead he went to the province. Now in Canada, police jurisdiction is federal jurisdiction. Welfare is provincial. Okay. The provinces are supposed to take care of services, supports, shelter, resources. All of those things are underneath the welfare umbrella. Okay. And that's why originally when he went to them saying, hey, you need to pay me to open up child shelters because keeping them with dogs is wrong, he went to the right source. But then he went back to that source to get to get jurisdiction over these laws that they don't have the power to give away, but they gave it to him. Okay, so all of a sudden now,
how do they give it to him? Like the mayor said, it's okay, buddy, you could just deal with that stuff for us?
It's not exactly the mayor, but it's the what do they call them? Oh, geez, my brain is just blanked. Basically, it's the person that is elected to be in charge of the province. Okay, and so they oversee all of the provincial stuff. Right now, it's premier. That's what they call them. They call them the premier. So the premier gave him the power, and they created an act. Okay, with all of these laws that they were now taking from the feds without any jurisdiction, okay? And they created an act that gave him the power to decide children could come and be taken away, and
so hang on a minute. The province of Ontario went ahead and said and created an act, which is not an act, like statutes and acts.
It's a law.
Which is like a law, okay?
Laws.
Which says that you can do this, you could do the job that the police is not really doing, or not that. No, they did something else. Rather than prosecuting the parents who are not taking care of their children, they said, you just go and house them somewhere, and here's the money to do that. Yes? And what you're saying is they had no legal power to do that. So the acts that they created for the children, it's very important to understand, because somebody listening to this should say to himself, well, what's the problem with that? He did a good thing. Well, what does Pamela want? It's all great stuff. It's all in the interest of the child. But we're going to get to the gist of this in a moment, where the whole thing flips.
That's right.
So now he what's his name? Kelso is doing a good thing. He's housing the children. There's an illegal act supporting it, which again, it's kind of a good thing because he's doing a good thing, until we get to the bad part in a moment, which makes the whole thing even worse, because everything that's happening now, which we're going to talk about, is illegal, although it looks legal. But anyway, so moving on, what happened then? I mean, I know...
Well, they spread across the province. They opened up, I believe it's 53 different offices just in one province alone, okay? And they were picking up kids left, right, and center. They have an open checkbook with the government. So for every child that they take, they get paid. There's no limit. It's just as if you take a child, that's okay, we pay you.
Yep.
Now, because they were taking federal jurisdiction, and even though the province had given them jurisdiction, no one could oversee them. No one. They set up provincial level courts, which are illegal also. Okay, they set up these provincial courts, and nobody, literally, you can call anyone you want in the provincial government because they pay them. They write the act that is supposed to govern this corporation, and you can call anybody. You can call the privacy commissioner. You can call the local area MPPs that are, supposed to be protecting their constituents' rights and their constituents' interests. You can call anyone you want. Nobody has the power or the ability to investigate and oversee what they do.
Okay.
Period.
So let's take an example.
Okay.
Let's go back then. Let's say in the late 1800s or beginning of the 1900s. Let's take a case where there is a child in the street because his mother is working, and it's it's a single mother, and the child happens to be working like at a hard labor because he has to help his mother support. But it's only a temporary thing. He only did it for like 2 weeks, and then the mother got a job, and everything's fine, and the child didn't need to help her anymore. But during those 2 weeks, when he was doing a little bit of work, he was spotted by the authorities, and they said, hang on a minute, there's a child here that's being neglected. Let's take him away, stick him in a home. We don't even ask the mother if it's okay. Not let her even
sticking them in cages.
Sorry?
They were still putting them in cages. Children were still kept in iron cages up until, as far as I can find, up until in the mid-1950s.
Okay. So
they just weren't housed with animals anymore.
Yep. In cages.
They were still kept in cages. But yeah, they actually thought that was better. Remove them from their mother for whatever reason they may be out there. Don't give them a chance to defend themselves. Don't give them any rights. There's no due process. You can't even face your accusers. Everything's done anonymously.
Okay.
And take your child and put them into a cage. Now, what this ended up turning into was these children were actually used for providing child slave labor. They were sold to farmers.
Okay, so now we're getting to the... So I guess at one point, maybe shortly after Kelso, set this whole thing up with good intentions, someone else saw an opportunity here to make money. And they said, hang on a minute, there's a loophole, or there's something has been created here that we could ride on and make money from, and start taking kids whose parents are pretty fit to take care of them, but we could say that they're not. And since their system is all geared up in our favor, and the mother can't even state her case, and nobody's going to listen to her, and the special courts that were set up with judges, and I think you mentioned that all you need to do is to convince the judge by 51% that the mother might not be fit. Something like that?
Or may fail to provide for. There's a risk that they may lose their job. There is a risk that they may neglect them. There is a possibility or a chance that they might lose their temper and abuse their kids. Under the laws, first of all, 75% of women in the world require some sort of psychiatric support at one time in their life or another, whether it's antidepressants, whether it's counseling. It could be something as little as sleeping pills to get to sleep at night, okay? That, under these laws, is worthy of kidnapping your children, because that makes you a risk to your child.
Yeah.
Oh, you needed psychiatric support back in 15 years ago? You needed sleeping pills to sleep? Oh, that makes you a risk to your child.
Yeah, so let's talk about those courts a moment. So in those courts, but before we talk about the courts, I was thinking, so let's say at some point, again, everything became more in favor of the traffickers. So that the so-called, the helpers with the good intention, with time became the abusers, the traffickers. And the more time went on, the more the system became more in favor of the traffickers, always under the guise of the children's protection. And I guess some children are being saved and protected. It's not all, but there's a growing number of kids that are being kidnapped as well, compared to the ones that are actually being saved because their mothers are unfit and they are juggies and drunks, etc. What would you say the ratio is today? Out of all the children that are being taken from their parents and adopted, how many are fit and how many are actually unfit, percentage-wise?
That's a tricky answer, because I have to tell you, I don't know of a single one.
That's unfit.
Know,
that's unfit.
That needed support.
You don't know a single one that's unfit or fit?
I don't know a single one that was actually unfit.
Yeah. Wow.
They don't go after those cases, because those cases actually require them to spend money helping that child. Okay. I know foster children who were left in their abusive, neglectful homes. I know of one young woman now. I love this woman. She is fierce. She has fought all the stereotypes and all of the outcomes that they have for these children. She has overcome all of them. She's an amazing woman. But they literally kept leaving her. Her mother was a drug addict. Her mother was neglecting them. They had to shower in McDonald's bathrooms. They had to nail blankets up over their windows in the winter because they had no heat. They had no running water. The social workers were called constantly. They were coming to the house, and they kept leaving the girls behind.
Why? I don't understand. Why did they not take them and traffic them?
Because the chances of them being abused and the chances of them being adopted for profit are very low, because there are going to be problems, right? So they don't want those cases.
What problems?
They want the cases.
Sorry, what problems? What problems?
Well, okay, if you're neglected that bad, and if you see a lot of things, like if your mom's a drug addict and is doing all of these behaviors in front of you, they know that's going to damage you to a certain point. You're going to need counseling.
Yep.
You're going to need therapy. You're going to need supports. They don't do that. They don't do that. So, they just want to transfer you from one place to another.
Exactly. So they transfer them. The adopted parents are not are not told about the history of the child, and there you go. They've just trafficked them. Why is it a problem?
But these are older children. These are not babies, for one. They have a lot of babies already from drug-addicted parents that they can't find homes for, right? So they're in the foster care system, which is another exploitive part of it. But really, these private corporations, they're just like McDonald's. They're just like the car companies. They don't have to disclose how much money they make. So their number one business that they don't have to disclose to the public is they want easy, clean, nice babies that they can rehome for the biggest amount of profit possible.
And as we said before, with the least amount of potential problems, like the child coming back and asking to see who the parents are. So you want the father to not be around. You want the mother to be poor. So, you know, she can't protect herself. And we're going to talk about this law in a moment, which is, you mentioned, I think, that if a person... today, a child could be taken away from his parents, and if they resist in any way, they get put in jail. Like if
you dare speak out,
So what does
jail
that?
And a huge fine.
So basically, if a woman today gives birth, the child services take the baby because they believe that the mother is unfit to take care of the child. They go to this special court. And they say to the judge, look, we believe she's unfit because she used to take sleeping pills and she might lose her job. And it's very possible that, you know, a year down the line, this child won't be able to be supported by his mother. So we should give him to adoption. And if the judge goes, there's 51% that what you're saying is probable and might actually happen. And I 51% believe in what you're saying. Not 100, not beyond the shadow of a doubt, but 51%.
Right.
That's enough for him to rule for the baby to be taken. Now, once he has done that, unlike a criminal, a murderer, for example, who gets the right to come and present his story and defend himself and say, well, I actually didn't murder that person. I was here, I was there. The mother is given no rights whatsoever. And if she dares to interfere in any way, she's put in jail herself and fined $10,000. Am I right?
Yes, if she tries to speak out, if she tries to publicize her name, like mothers cannot say, my child was taken by the Children's Aid Society, my name is Pamela Palmer, because that leads to the identification of my child. Now, even though this is technically a law that the criminal side is now supposed to, the Crown is supposed to have jurisdiction over prosecuting that, they don't let them. The Children's Aid Society's own lawyers that are paid by the taxpayers through this private corporation, they are the ones that file the charges against you. They are the ones that prosecute these mothers in criminal court for breaking these automatic gag laws. That's what they're called. They're automatic gag laws, okay? So normally in criminal court, there's a whole thing that goes on, and then the judge can deem this gagged where it can't go in public, right? But no, in family court, it's automatic gag laws. So if you do anything that leads to the identification of your child, system themselves, the Children's Aid Society, their own lawyers prosecute the mothers in criminal court, and they always go for 6-month minimum in prison. And the reason for that is you can't hire a paralegal. You have to get a lawyer. Well, most of these moms are poor. They can't afford a lawyer. And so they're taking away the opportunity of getting a paralegal, which is something that's a lot more affordable, something that they would be able to help them. But that 6-month minimum, that's gone. And the maximum fine is $10,000. And they always go for the maximum.
Yep. Now, you just said criminal courts. Are these the special family courts? Are these the special family courts or not?
No, this is in criminal court now. You are a criminal once you speak out. Once you identify your child, you're a criminal.
Okay. But we just said that...
And you can't defend yourself against that, because why your child was taken is not before the judge.
So, one second. So there's two courts.
Why you're speaking out is not the issue. The fact that you did speak out, the fact that you broke that law, that's the only thing that is before the judge.
Yes. So there's two courts. There's the special family court where the initial proceedings take place, which is the kidnapping of the kids, basically, without the mother having the chance to say a word. Does she need to appear in court at all? In that family court?
She can appear in court. Now, this is where it gets really tricky. Like, it's taken me a long time to learn this. There is only one thing that I know that can help get a mother's child home right away, but there's 5 days to get it done. Most mothers are so traumatized because with older children, you get a phone call. Your child isn't coming home from school today. We've taken them into foster care. No, we're not telling you where they are. You'll get your court papers. We'll tell you when your hearing is. And that's it. That's it. You're left scrambling. Where's my child? What do I do? Like, you don't know. They've got 5 days legally before they have to appear in front of these family court judges. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so there's only one tactic that I know that works, a legal tactic, and that is you have to file an affidavit canceling all the reasons for risk of harm. Okay. And you have to basically state clearly that your child needs to be returned to you until this can go for trial. Okay. And you have to show all of your supports that you have. You have to get letters from everyone that you know, teachers, neighbors, your family doctor. You have 5 days to do this. And then you have to cancel all your reasons of risk of harm or risk. And harm is one of them. Okay. So for example, you would say, I have no history of abuse of my child or of anybody else's child. So now you've canceled out risk of abuse. Yep. There is no history of neglect of me and my child or anyone else's child. And so technically you're canceling that out. Now, you call a lawyer, they'll tell you something completely different. Well, you have to wait, you have to go to court. That's when they serve you I call it the big book of bullshit. Excuse my language, but that's what it is. Because all they do is write stereotypes. There's no facts. There's no evidence. There's no, Pamela did this on this date at this time, which that is considered evidence. There's none of that, okay? It's all wishy-washy risk and maybes and possibly because we think, okay? But the lawyers will tell you, you have to wait until that first day of court to find out first what their position is. If you do that, your children are gone. They're gone. They get status quo, and that's it. The court's number one job or their number one focus is maintaining status quo. Okay. Once you pass that first court date, they now have status quo.
Okay.
So the amount of families that actually go through the whole process and win their children back, this is appalling. 1 in 50 families.
Wow.
Make it all the way to trial and get their children back.
Yep.
And the only reason they do that, Michael, is because not even the police have that good of a record. Okay? So the only reason they give that 150 out of family, that makes it to trial. That's key. I got denied my right to trial. My child was taken based on summary judgment. Okay. And a lot of families are the same thing. You get denied your right to trial, even though it's a fixed trial. It's such a pile of crap. We'll get to that later. But most children are taken away by what's called a summary judgment. They are denied their right to trial.
Okay.
And the ones that do make it all the way, only 1 in 50.
Yeah, I understand.
This,
so I wanted to just, before we continue, about the two courts.
Yeah.
So the first court, the family court, is the court that decides that the mother is unfit based on child aids claims that she might be unfit and something might happen to the child. There's no evidence that it has actually happened, but it might happen. And the judge goes, sounds cool to me. I'm giving you the right to take away the kid. Then we said that there was, and then the mother is told, and she says, no, I'm not having that. I'm going to go to the press and I'm going to say that this has happened to me and my name is so-and-so and how dare they take away my child. Then child's aid lawyers, children's aid lawyer will sue the mother in another court, in a criminal court, for doing that, which is against a law that says that the mother is not allowed to do that. And I'm guessing, but unlike the first court where she's not given a chance to present her case, in the second court, she does have a chance. So maybe the judge there might go, well, hang on a minute, it makes sense. You know, she's right. You know, her kid shouldn't have been taken away from her.
No.
No?
But you don't get to present that. The thing with the courts is you only get to present what the issue is. Okay? So the issue is,
did she go against the law? And it doesn't matter what the law could be completely crazy. And the judge goes, I'm not the lawmaker. I'm just the judge. And I was taught in judge school to see what the law says, no matter how ridiculous and stupid it is and unfair. But if the case shows that the woman actually said something and she's not meant to say it, even though she might be right, guilty.
Correct.
I see.
Correct.
Terrible.
Okay. Now, I do know one woman. She's a paralegal out of Ottawa, and she has helped many of these mothers, most of them very young, a lot of them also Indigenous. Okay. And her story is quite amazing. She's a phenomenal activist. I've worked with her on many projects, and we have just kicked butt. Canada hates me, okay? Let me tell you, I am Canada's #1 enemy. They absolutely can't stand me. But what she did was she published actual court papers on archive.org that not only identify the mother, but also identify the child. Now, she's a paralegal, okay? Most of these parents that they go after don't have the ability to defend themselves. They don't understand constitutional law, so they can't challenge this properly, okay?
And they have no money for a proper lawyer.
Tell the story. Right. They can't afford a lawyer. The lawyer's going to throw them under the bus anyway, because if they dare go against the system, well, what does that what happens, right? They're going to lose their license to practice, or they're going to be punished, basically. Because just like the mother, the Children's Aid Society lawyers also file against lawyers that don't go with the flow. Okay. So, but she was actually in a court hearing for this mother that she's published the documents on archive.org. And the judge said, the Attorney General has told me that somebody in here has published documents online that identify these children, and they better come down now. Now, the other advocates that were in the courtroom at the time, they all went home freaking out and deleting the link, okay, to the documents. But this paralegal that I know, she went back, and at first she was nervous, you know, because she's a licensed paralegal. And at first she was nervous. She's like, you know what? No, let them come after me. And you know what? It's been 10 years now. Those documents are still online. They still have not come after her, because they know she will challenge that gag law. She will challenge the constitutionality and how illegal it is, that it's automatic, and that you can't report when crimes are being done to children because of this automatic gag law. And they know she'll beat it. I bet she would love them to come after her, because then she could win she could create a precedent for other people. Exactly.
Terrible.
Exactly. Because that would mean so many parents could speak out and they could talk about what's happening to them.
Yeah.
But they haven't. They're still up there on the internet today.
So what about the indigenous people? I actually heard a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that there was a terrible thing that happened to indigenous people in Canada that were trafficked or stolen from their parents.
It still hasn't ended. It still has not ended. So with the colonialism, okay, one of the reasons why I cannot stand Thanksgiving and why I don't, it's a holiday in Canada and the United States. I got kicked out of Thanksgiving dinner when I was 13 because I said I refused to celebrate poisoning blankets and stealing land from the indigenous tribes. And so I've always been a little bit of a rebel and anti-propaganda stuff, right? Anti-colonialism, anti-all that stuff, because I know what it means. Even though I'm not indigenous, the same thing still happens to me.
Yeah.
But colonialism in Canada has absolutely tried so hard to destroy the indigenous people. Now, I'll give you examples of just how bad it is. So first of all, they had the residential schools, okay? And the residential schools were where they were taking children, and it was genocide, literally genocide. They were refusing to allow them to speak their native languages. They only had to speak English or French, okay? They were taking them literally from their families and putting them into these schools. Many of them were abused so badly they were killed. The ones that survived still have severe trauma. They were adopted all around the world like they were commodities, like it was the hip thing or the cool thing at the time to have a little native baby, okay? I know the princess of the the hereditary princess of the Chan tribe, which is one of the biggest tribes in British Columbia, and she knows that she has relatives literally all over Europe that were adopted. They were stolen from their family and adopted, like for profit, of course. And here you go, little native babies.
Yep.
Okay, because that was the cool thing to have.
Yeah.
Now, when all of this stuff, the last so-called residential school didn't close until sometime in the 1990s. But they want to convince you that, no, this was all in the black and white television days. You know, this was your great-great-grandpa. You know, no, this is long time ago. No, this is while I was still a teenager. This was after my daughter was born.
Mm-hmm.
This was still going on. Now, this is the worst part. The way they keep getting away with these crimes over and over and over, and literally for generations, is all they do is they change the name. They close down that location. They hand it over to somebody else, okay, which most times is the exact same thing. They just change their name.
What do you mean?
And
for example,
location.
Who changed what?
For example, today they're called residential homes.
What are called? And what were they called before?
Residential schools.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So like they don't even do that good of a job of changing their names. So now they're called group homes and they're called residential homes. And they do the exact same thing.
But who gets to those homes? I don't understand. What are the homes for?
They take indigenous kids
and put them
indigenous kids.
But that's before they adopt them out?
Oh, these ones they don't even try to adopt out. The
so
ones
what
that
do they gain?
Residential homes.
So what do they gain? The traffickers don't make any money.
Open paychecks. They make money. They don't make money. They don't make as much money selling them like they do in the adoption market. But this is the other aspect of the child trafficking. They're paid to house them.
Mm.
They get maximum profits for minimum spending. There is, in 2018, the Ontario coroner put out a report, okay, on these specific Native children or Indigenous children. Every single one in that report showed signs of child sex trafficking. Every single one.
What does that mean?
Okay,
signs of
children.
Sex trafficking?
Sex trafficking.
Meaning,
okay, what? They have it's not just adoption that they make money off of.
Uh-huh. So
it's extremely.
But I want to understand. Sex trafficking means what? That they take the child, they put them in a special children's home, claiming it's for their own protection because the environment they're growing up in is dangerous to them, etc. And then they turn them into what? They kind of prostitute them locally. So the child is being sent away for the evening to be abused sexually, and then it's brought back to that children's home, and just they keep doing that?
Yep.
Okay, that's horrible.
Yep. So that's part of it. Another part of it, again, is they're paid extraordinary amounts to house them. There is money given. Money is given for medical and for clothing and for all of this care, but none of that goes to the kids. A very teeny weeny tiny portion actually goes towards that. The rest of it goes into their pockets. Now, this is another really disturbing thing. A lot of these group homes that are operating today are actually owned by spouses, okay, of people that work for the Children's Aid Society. So let's say the wife is a manager or is a social worker. The husband is the director of the group home where they stick these children.
I see. Okay, that's clear.
That's so common.
What about churches? You know how we spoke about indigenous people?
Well too. Now, this I can't prove.
What's the story with the churches, though? I have no idea. I just know churches.
Oh, they were the ones that were originally going. And if you look at Canadian folk art paintings, okay, you see the RCMP, which everybody knows, the Canadian police with the red jackets and the big broad hats and all that stuff, right? Riding on their horses. The RCMP wasn't actually started as a federal police force to help keep the peace, right? It wasn't there about protecting its citizens. It was set up specifically to police Indigenous tribes. And there is tons of folk art paints out there that actually show the RCMP grabbing children from Indigenous mothers, ripping them out of their arms and handing them to priests and handing them to nuns. So they were a large part of taking the children and participating in the genocide. You can't believe your pagan, religions. You can't follow your Indigenous upbringings. You now have to be Catholic. You now have to be Christian.
So the church
now can only speak
was
English.
like the care home? That the children's care home was the church itself?
Yes. Yes, the churches set up what's called the residential schools, and they were in charge of taking care of these children. There are some residential schools now where they've gone and done scans and found massive graves where children's bones are found because they died. Just like everybody knows, like everybody thought Sinead O'Connor was crazy and they ostracized her in the 90s, right, for ripping up the photo of the Pope and speaking out about the abuses that the church was doing to children. They were doing this to Indigenous people long before, but nobody ever listened to them.
Yeah.
No one ever listened to them. And even though there are mass graves across Canada, nobody gave them any thought.
Unbelievable.
They still don't.
Unbelievable.
They still don't.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, they still don't. In British Columbia, let me give you some numbers, okay? According to the federal government, which I don't trust them and believe them worth a crock, but according to the federal government, foster care and the children that are in foster care account for 52%, okay, of the children in care. Now, that is absolutely crock, and I'll tell you why. In British Columbia, over 94% of the children apprehended, the children that are adopted, and the children that are warehoused in foster homes are Indigenous children. In Manitoba, it's more than 86%.
Wow.
In Toronto, okay, which there's a very diverse culture, Toronto is known as one of the most cultural cities in the world. Over 52% of the children in foster care in Toronto are Black.
Because they're easy targets, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to the birth alert. What exactly is that?
Oh. Now, birth alert replaced the maternity homes. So when they could no longer justify to society that we're going to lock up these single moms, we're going to drug them, we're going to steal their babies, we're going to convince them of all these horrible things. What they did was they set up a system in the hospitals called Birth Alert. And it's all mothers, it's all women that are on there. Basically, all the foster children that went through foster care, they're all the girls, they're on that list. Children like me weren't on there because we weren't discovered. I wasn't discovered until my adoption had failed. They don't assume that our adoptions are going to fail. But once they find out, our adoptions are failed, we're reverted right back into farms, and our wombs are their profit. Okay. So our children we're basically cattle, and our children are their crop.
Yeah, so let's understand that. So you, Pamela, you are actually on that birth alert because...
I'm on that list. My firstborn daughter is on that list.
Yeah, but because you say that your adoption failed. So what does that mean?
Yes.
So what does that mean that it failed?
I didn't take to the propaganda. Basically, my placement didn't work out. And a lot of us
Can you tell us about it? I mean, what
that's all it takes.
When you were 10, you say that you were told the story by your adopted parents about your mother being a prostitute and all that. And then what? When you were 12, you were still with them. And when you were 13, you were still with them. Until when did you leave home?
I left home at 14. I left home at 14.
Where was that? In Canada?
In Toronto.
And where did you go?
I went to downtown Toronto for most of it. At first, I was still trying to go to school. Like, I knew I deserved better. You know what I mean? I knew that this wasn't the way life was supposed to be. I still tried so hard to finish school. I stayed at friends' houses. I had all these excuses for staying at different friends' houses. It was kind of ridiculous because normally you can't sleep over unless it's the weekend.
That's
right?
Amazing. So we know now, but we know now that since you were 13, then you already know you're no good for them to kidnap and adopt and sell you because you're too old by then. And now,
right.
But now you're allowed to stay on the streets and be homeless and be, and live in bad conditions. Nobody cares about that.
They did try to put me in a group home at one point.
Yep.
They did, because again, it's funding, right? It's like they get money. Put a kid in a place, they get money, right? They also they get for apprehending children. Every time they apprehend a child, they get a bonus on top of their insane salaries.
Yeah.
Okay. They get a bonus as well. So they did try. But no, I was out of there right away. They were the things that I witnessed in the group home. Again, I was horrified. And most of these kids were raised in the system. Like, they were taken when they were 3 or 4, or they were taken when they were 7 and 8. And they're literally treated not as children. They are told straight up, we're not here to love you. We're only here because we're paid to take care of you. They are institutionalized immediately. Immediately. They have rules for foster parents if you dare advocate for the child. So people think that, I'm going to become a foster parent because I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to treat my kids differently. Bullshit. Bullshit. The second you try to advocate for that child and say, listen, this child needs to be seen by a doctor because I'm seeing this problem, or this child needs counseling for this reason, they remove the child and put it into another home. Because that's seen as caring for the child. You're not allowed to do that. You're only supposed to be providing their rights.
And why not shelter, care? Because it costs money?
Clothing. Yes, it's institutionalizing them. It's because then they can go and take that child, right? Most of them are girls, okay? They can take that child and put them on birth alert. With fathers, I know so many fathers that grew up in the system. Now, the mothers of their children are not foster kids. The second they find out that the dad was a foster child, of course they can't put foster boys on birth alert. But the second they find out that the father was in foster care, they go after that family.
So I want to understand that again. So what you're saying, first of all, the birth alert, so we understand what exactly is birth alert, it's a list of people.
I go into a hospital.
Yeah.
I go into a hospital. I deliver my child. I'm in the system. So the hospital contacts the Child Protection Agency of whatever province I'm in. Okay. And they notify them that I am there and that I'm having a child. Literally within hours of giving birth, my child is kidnapped from that hospital and removed.
And the reason is because they know they've targeted you long before that as someone whose adoption failed. So she's likely to be all alone in the world and nobody to support her because you yourself left the only family that wanted to help you since your mother was a prostitute and all that. And now you're an easy target. So they already know in advance that you're an easy target, and they wait for you to give birth, and they wait for you there to kidnap your child and go through the whole process we spoke about earlier.
That's right.
And that's the birth alert.
And you have no, like in criminal court, okay, when you're accused of committing a crime, you have the right to face your accusers, right? You have a right to full disclosure. You have a right to know all the evidence that they have against you. You have a right to a full, open, fair trial, okay? And it has to be done within a certain amount of time, right? You have a right to legal defense.
Yep.
You have a right to consult with a lawyer. You have all of these rights. None of those apply in family court. It's all anonymous. And I'll give you an example. I've read so many court papers over my years. I can even tell families now what the next thing is going to be that they file against them. That's how well I know. I am convinced there is a system with check boxes, and they just check off the boxes that they want to apply to this family, and it puts in the specifics like the child's name or the parent's name. But other than that, I have seen the exact same paragraphs on multiple families' filed court papers. Multiple. That's not a coincidence.
So what does that mean?
And not even in the same province.
Huh.
We're talking not just in Ontario. I've read the same thing out of British Columbia, out of Nova Scotia, out of Manitoba, out of Ontario, like literally the exact same. The only difference is they changed the names or they changed the date. That's it.
What did it say, the paragraph?
That's it. Things like, oh gosh, there's so many examples. It's hard. My head gets cloudy. But for example, with me, let's use me. I've seen this on multiple things. Pamela was adopted as a child, and her adoption placement failed. This makes her unable to create a bond with her child, because I was basically unable to bond with whatever. So-and-so was a street kid growing up. This means that they are irresponsible. They leave their child at home unattended, and they go out and party. That's another one.
Okay.
Like, these are so common.
And where are these clauses placed again? Where did you read that?
These are in the systems of the workers. And so when the workers are building their affidavit against you to file in court, I am convinced that they're just checking off whatever boxes that they want to apply to you and apply to your family.
It's not like they specifically look into your case and spend time actually learning about it and really, really finding out the unique aspects of your life and what you've gone through and assess it objectively. That's not happening.
And now this is another problem too. They also trick you, and the lawyers are involved in this. Now, another thing. Okay. Now, because I was an ex-street kid. Now, I didn't fall for this, okay? I'm very court savvy, though. So I didn't fall for this. But what they do to a lot of parents, and this is disgusting, okay? So let's say they're accusing you of being a drug addict. And you're like, I'm not a drug addict. You go and you get a drug test to prove that you're clean. Legally, you've now established yourself as a drug addict, because people that don't do drugs don't get drug tests. All you've established is that you're clean right now.
Yeah, so they basically trick you.
Legally, you just screwed yourself.
Yeah.
And lawyers do this to clients all the time.
Okay.
If they're accusing you of having anger problems, and you say, no, I don't, but you go for anger management classes because that's one of the hoops they've given you to jump in, okay?
Yeah.
You've now established yourself as having anger management problems. If you go for any counseling whatsoever, you've now established yourself as having that problem.
It's like they let you dig your own grave.
That's right.
So
they force you to, and many times, we're not going to give you a child. We will not allow you to have your visit unless you do this.
Mm-hmm. So what about you, coming back to you? So you were 13, you're on the streets, they tried to put you in foster homes or in childcare homes. You saw terrible things there, which you didn't mention, or you did mention.
I saw them restraining children, okay, pinning kids down. Now, restraining a child, these children were not a risk to anyone. They weren't threatening anyone. All they were doing was arguing with the group home person. And I saw them literally grab these kids, throw them on the ground, restrain them, and hold them there until they submitted. That's all it was about,
Yeah.
was making them submit.
So then
They
what
would
happened?
scream until no more sound came out of their throats.
Terrible. How long were you in those homes? Till what age?
I was in one group home for only 3 days, and they put me into I was 13, 14, I think, at this point, because like I went on the streets, and then I ended up going into one of these homes thinking, okay, maybe they'll help, right? Ooh, did I learn wrong, like fast? So then I was in one foster home for 3 days. Then they removed me to a group home because I wasn't going along with the crap. And in the group home, that's where you really saw abuses. Now, in the foster home, the foster mother, she was very, I mean, she had her own kids, and then she had foster kids. And she made you know right away, you are not my child. You are separate from my kids. My kids can do whatever they want. You better do what you say, or I'm going to report you, and you're going to go to the group home. Okay? And it was just the right away threat. Like, you're only here because I'm paid to provide you with this. Don't give me any stories. Don't give me any crap. Do as you're told, or you're going to go there.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Okay? So what happened then?
They're paid just to process you.
Yeah.
And then, so I left, or well, they came and got me because she was downstairs at the dining room table with her family and with the other foster kids doing nothing. She was, again, trying to get me to submit. Okay? And all she was doing was bad-mouthing me. She was doing the exact same thing like my adoptive did. You know, like, oh, you're going to turn out like your real mother. You're a whore. You're going to be a prostitute. You're going to be this and that. She was doing basically the same thing. And so I wouldn't go to bed. I didn't care what she said. I was standing there at the top of the stairs listening to her. And my foster sister at the time was saying, she's going to catch you. You better get into bed. If you don't get into bed, you know what I mean? Like, my foster sister had already submitted a long time ago. And I turned around and I was talking to her, right? And she's telling me, get into bed. She's going to catch you. She's going to catch you. Well, I turned around and there was the foster mother. And I said right to her face, I did call her a nasty name. And I told her, I don't have to take this. I don't know who you think you are, but I don't have to take this. She threw up arms. Oh, she's threatening me, and called the system. They picked me up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, put me into this group home where they literally strip you down. Okay, they strip you down. It's, again, another humiliation tactic. They strip you down like you're a criminal for standing up for yourself. Okay, they strip you down. They count every single piece of everything that you bring into the place. So they know exactly how many pairs of underwear you have. They know everything. Like, it's almost like they count on your head, check you, you know, oh, we got to make sure that you're not full of bugs and that you're not disease ridden. Like I'm some mangy cat, you know what I mean? Like, then that's part of the whole thing. It's just so horrific what they do. So after 2 weeks in that place, I went on what's called, everybody knows, as AWOL, absent without leave. And I saw a lot of kids trying to escape while I was there. They went the wrong way. I went the other way, and I made it all the way out to the highway, and they never caught me. And I stayed out on the streets until I was 16.
And then?
And well, then I had met the father of my daughter, and he impregnated me, and I was off of the streets. Now, he was abusive. I will say that, you know, like, I'm not perfect. Okay. I'm not. I made mistakes, but I've learned from my mistakes. Okay. And he was abusive. When my firstborn was born, this is the hard part. Like, I wanted her to have what I couldn't have. And that was her real mom and her real dad. But I had seen all this abuse, and I had all of this propaganda and all of this mental warfare basically go on my whole life, that I wanted her to have her real parents, but I did not for a moment want anyone to do that to her. She was innocent. She didn't choose me to be her mother. I chose to have her. And who was I to be a bad mom? Who was I to allow her to be raised in this place? So I was with her father until she was 6 months old. And I kept telling him, you know, like, I want her to have her real mom and her real dad, but not at the cost of her well-being. She is not going to be raised seeing you hit me. She is not going to be raised seeing you calling me names. She is not going to be raised thinking that that is normal, because she deserves better than that. Well, we ended up breaking up. We ended up separating, and he was dating someone else. I started dating someone else, and he put me in the hospital.
How?
And so
he beat you up?
He beat the living crap out of me in order to humiliate me in front of my new boyfriend. Now, I was only 17 at the time. So my name was kept out of the news. But to this day, he has the longest sentence ever for assault causing bodily harm. He actually got penitentiary time in Canada. And the judge doubled his sentence because he believed he did it to humiliate me. He didn't just do it to beat me, but he also did it to humiliate me. And so for that reason, he doubled the sentence. Now,
how many years
had my daughter.
in jail?
He got 4 years.
Okay.
For assault causing bodily harm. And so he went to prison. I went and filed in the family courts for full custody. I got full custody, no problem. They had to waive child support because back then, the father or your spouse, your ex-spouse, had to know where you lived in order to be able to give you child support. And so because of that, they waived child support. So I raised my daughter completely on my own. And they didn't know about anything really, like about the fact that I was a failed adoption. But how come they didn't take your daughter
when she was born? Just because you were targeted, you were on birth alert.
This was done through. Well, this is the thing. I wasn't on birth alert yet. I'm on birth alert now. I'm on birth alert now. I wasn't on there yet because they didn't quite know. Like, yes, I was in the Mississauga system for a short amount of time, right? But they didn't have me on birth alert yet. It wasn't until they took my daughter. That's when.
How did they take her? Did we get to that part?
They took her when she was 10 years old. Now my daughter's gifted. Okay.
And how old were you?
I was 27 when they took her from me. Okay. She was 10 years old. My mom had passed away. So I had even less support from my family. When my mom died, I was adopted for my mom.
Your adopted mom?
Yes. So when she passed away,
it failed. But I thought the adoption failed.
It did fail. Like I was still, this is the thing. Like it's almost like Munchausen syndrome. You know what I mean? Like they're your captors kind of thing, but you keep going back. You're still connected to them. They're all you know. You're raised that these are your parents. They're all that you know. So you're still connected with them, even though I didn't live with them, even though I didn't take a lot of crap from them. Like I still, you still like it's hard to be alone in the world.
It's amazing that they keep taking you back. I mean, they could have said, get lost.
No, I never moved back.
Yeah, but they could have said, we don't want to help you. So it's kind of a good thing.
No, they didn't.
I mean, what I'm saying is the adoption didn't completely fail. It did succeed to some extent.
To some extent, because of that connection. Like I still call them my mom and dad, even though they're not.
Yeah.
I still have. It's weird. I still love them in a weird way. Do you know what I mean? Like I can understand what's that syndrome that they call?
I think it's Stockholm, the Stockholm Syndrome, where you fall in love with your captors. The person that kidnaps you.
Exactly. Exactly. It's exactly like that. Like you're still connected with them.
Yeah.
So I was still technically connected with them. Like we would fight all the time. I still wasn't taking the propaganda. I was still standing up for myself. I will give my adoptive mother credit. She did treat my daughter really well.
Yep.
She loved her.
So she died eventually. The grandmother died. Your mother died.
My mom, exactly. Her grandmother died. And when my mom died, my family died with her. And I knew this from young because I was adopted for my mom. It was my mom that couldn't have children.
Mm-hmm.
It was my mom. So I was Donna's daughter. I talk like my mom. If I pick up the phone at my mother's house, people go, Donna? Well, she's been dead for so many years. Yeah. I sound like her. I write like her. I talk like her because I was raised to be her.
So your sisters?
Right? I'm not.
What about
I have one brother who's adopted, but he was adopted 8 years later from a different family.
Yeah.
And he took to the adoption propaganda. They did it differently with him. They didn't tell him till he was 10.
That's what
right?
they did
so
with
he
you.
Didn't know where. No, I was raised my entire life knowing I was adopted.
Okay.
They told him nothing until he was 10 years old. I didn't even know that. I thought they were raising him the same way that they raised me. But he was 8 years old by the time he was, or I was 8 years old when he was adopted. I was out of the house by the time I was 14.
Okay.
So I wasn't there, you know what I mean, to really see that they hadn't told him or to know.
I understand, but I'm trying to get to the point that they took your daughter when you were 27.
Okay,
she was 10, I believe.
She was 10. My mom had passed away.
Yep.
And my mom was a school teacher, okay? Before, like long before. She was a school teacher. And my mom was gifted. My daughter was gifted. She started reading when she was only 4 years old, okay? We did so many projects and things at home. And I'll give you an example. This is in her Ontario school record, okay? In grade 2, when the children were learning about dinosaurs, my daughter went off and did an individual project on the paleontologists and their importance in our society. And the reason why was because not only did she already know all of the dinosaurs' names, she already knew how to spell them too. Okay, so
clever girl.
So yeah, right, brilliant child. Well, and it was really easy to get her to get through school. You know what I mean? Because Nana was a school teacher, my mom was a school teacher, and my daughter and her were close.
Yep.
All of my connections had been broken. It was the one thing I didn't do to my daughter. As long as they weren't abusing her, as long as they were respecting her, as long as they were treating her with all the love and respect that she deserved, I did not cut off her connections. Okay, I was very conscientious.
With who? With the father? With the adopting father and the other children and the nieces and the cousins? With them?
They were all so good to her.
Okay,
so good to her,
but not to you.
And so, not to me.
So what happened?
I allowed,
So why did the authorities take your daughter away? Under what was the reason?
I contacted them because I understood that they were child welfare. I thought that they helped. My daughter, when my mom died, all of a sudden put on the stops. I don't want anything to do with school anymore. It's boring. I'm not going anymore. I don't care what they say. It's boring. It's boring. It's boring. Nana's not here. I don't have to get good report cards.
It is
anymore.
Boring.
Okay.
I must agree on that.
Me
Very
too.
Boring.
I'm in the 97th percentile. My daughter's in the 98th. Okay. So I understand too. Well, I started working with the school social worker almost immediately. What can we do? What can we do to help this? And she said to me, we have to get her tested for gifted school. They have special programs. It's a lot more challenging. She'll do much better in there, and we need to get her tested. Now, the problem at the time was the Toronto District School Board, their psychological department was on work to rule. They were on strike, so they weren't doing any testing. And so she said, I have to get it done privately. Now, I'm a resourceful person, okay? I went through the streets. Never once did the sex traffickers catch me. I'm one of the only street kids to make it off the streets that didn't come off with an alcohol problem. I did not come off with a drug problem. I was not addicted to anything like that. I used to go to the library during the day because I could give my bags, I could give the last of my possessions to the librarian and get lost in books all day. I was Jacques Cousteau. I was whoever I wanted to be, but I wasn't Pamela the street kid. Okay. And then at night, I would go to mom and pop restaurants that were shutting down, and I would offer to clean in exchange for them to feed me. So I'm a resourceful person. I know how to fight. I know how to find things that I need. And I learned some of the most amazing things being on the street. I really did. And they helped me. So anyways, I started calling resources for kids because I thought, okay, I made it, I worked at the Royal Bank for 4 years. I'm one of the only street kids with a grade 9 education to work at the Royal Bank. And that was because the street cred program that I got into, I kicked butt. I showed them I was worth everything. And normally the banks won't hire you unless you have some sort of a university degree, right? Yep. This is how resourceful I am. And so I thought, okay, I found these resources for me. I can find these resources for my daughter. And so I started calling everywhere. Where can I get this test done? My daughter needs to be tested. I called ABC, which was an organization for gifted children. I called psychologists, psychiatrists, my family doctor. It is not covered. Now, we have socialized healthcare, just like you do in Israel, okay? But there's only certain things that are covered. The rest of it, you're on your own. Now, being a single mom, they wanted anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 to test her. And no, I couldn't pay monthly. No, I wasn't allowed to, it was just pay up front. And they had to be done by 3 different people, and all those 3 different people needed to be paid.
Yep.
So finally, out of desperation, I called a number called 311. 311 is like a city information line, okay? It's almost like public directory when you want somebody's phone, only this is for a government directory. Where can I get this done? And they told me, contact the Children's Aid Society. They have these people on staff. They do these tests all the time. Biggest mistake of my life. This is how I got on their radar. This is how they kidnapped my daughter from school. And they said things like they did their own testing. They falsify anything that they do too, okay? They did their own psychological assessment on my daughter that said she was in the 44th percentile. She is disabled, not gifted. Now, anybody that knows about the percentiles, the 44th percentile is actually in the normal range. It's not in the disabled range. That's normal, okay? She was actually in the high 90s. It took me 2 or 3 years to finally get her tested through the Toronto District School Board, okay? And it came back, she's in the 98th percentile. She's 1 percentile higher than me, okay? And they enrolled her in gifted school.
But I don't understand. I thought she was taken away from you.
She was. No, okay. Now, this is another part of the game that they play. They take them away, okay? You go to court.
Can you tell us about the day they took her away? I want to hear about that.
The day that they took her away, they went into school. They didn't talk to the school social worker. They talked to people that weren't working with the family that didn't know. They only knew Deja putting on the brakes and fighting and resisting.
That's the name of your daughter?
Those were the only people that they talked to. They didn't talk to the social worker who had been to my home. They didn't talk to our neighbors, her friends, nobody. They only talked to the teachers that Deja was fighting with and not wanting to participate in their classes. And that's where they came up with their theories as to why. I got a call 15 minutes before my daughter was supposed to come home saying, your daughter is not coming home. We have taken her into foster care. Okay. I was besides myself. They organized for a phone call from the foster home that night. They were all on the phone, meaning the foster mother, the worker, and my daughter. She couldn't even speak. They actually said in the court papers that all my daughter could do was mew. And it's true. She couldn't say a word. She couldn't say a word. She was so devastated and so traumatized, she couldn't speak. 5 days later, we went into court, and I had, like, Mama Bear was there. I was given this big, thick book of their stereotypes and their assumptions. Now, I had been in the newspaper when I was 21 years of age because, like I said, I found that program, okay, that was for street kids that got me my job at the Royal Bank. My life has been well documented in Toronto. I have made it into the newspapers multiple times because of all of the things that I've achieved. I have overcome every stereotype, every wall, every speed bump that people put in front of me. I just bowled over it. You weren't stopping me because I knew I deserved better. I knew I could do better.
What happened in court?
You could tell me no a million times. I'll find the yes. Well, in the court, they handed me this document with all of these lies. When I was in the newspapers, Laurie Monsobratton, who is a social policy writer for the Toronto Star, did the article on me. They had in there, and in quotations, this is part of the anonymous thing, okay? And from the Toronto Star called, she did an interview on Pamela, and she found Pamela to be neglectful, Her house was a mess. Her daughter, my daughter wasn't in diapers at this time. Her daughter was in diapers and had rashes all over her bum, and she left her at home unattended. We did the article over the phone. We did the interview over the phone. Lori Montsebraten was never in my house. We literally did it over the phone.
So what are you saying? The whole thing was set up to just, you know, build a false case against you to take your child because you're vulnerable.
Exactly. So immediately I was like, this is it. After reading all of this bullshit in these papers, I'm sorry for swearing, but after reading all of these lies, I was adamant. I want a trial. I want to fight this. Enough is enough. I am not going through this. There's no way. Okay? No way you're getting away with this. I had the government, the children's aid lawyer. I had my own lawyer. Okay? They're a big part of the problem. My own lawyer. And I had the children's aid worker corner me in the hallway. Pamela, we know you want to go to trial. But you know what? It takes years to get to trial. Now, I'm thinking about criminal. I know criminal court. I know the rights. I know there's due process. And so I'm comparing family court to criminal court. And yeah, it can take up to 2 years to get your trial, right? And if you don't get your trial by 2 years, whatever. And this is what they're feeding me, okay? You want your child back now, don't you? If you wait and go to trial, we're going to have to keep your child in foster care until you get to trial.
So what are they offering? What did they offer you?
They offered me that if I signed stating that I had failed to provide for, and they compared it to a misdemeanor, that I had to do 3 things, okay? These 3 things were, I had to move out of the 3-bedroom home that I was living in, okay, with a friend of mine. I had to move out of that 3-bedroom home. I had to get counseling because, get this, the worker assessed me as no self-confidence, no self-esteem, powerless, helpless, and can't defend her or herself against the world. Michael, you've known me for how long? Would you use any of those words to describe me?
Definitely not.
Exactly. But this is what the children's aid worker had determined.
Why would you sign such a thing? You want your daughter? What they would do? They said if you sign that, we'll give your daughter back to you.
They convinced me it would take years to get to trial.
Yes.
And if I agreed, they would give my daughter back as soon as these 3 things were done.
So you signed.
Okay? They actually wrote it down and said, look, we will do this.
So did you sign?
You want your daughter back, don't you?
Yes. So you signed?
I signed.
And what happened then?
Lie. So I did those 3 things, okay? I did exactly what they wanted.
What did you tell your lawyer?
They tried.
Did you tell your lawyer, look, you're part of this?
On it. My lawyer actually called me an idiot and told me I deserved this because I called them in the first place. Not in this court hearing, in later meetings. I ended up firing her, of course. I went through about a half a dozen lawyers, and I ended up self-representing myself. And you know what the funny part was? Every time I represented myself, I got way further than I did with the lawyer.
I believe you.
Lawyers are just there to trip you up.
For sure. So what happened then? So you signed, you went to therapy, you did all these things, and then you came back and said, look, I did it. Can I have my child back? Sorry?
Yep. They said, no, not until we go back to the next hearing. They didn't reschedule the next hearing for 6 months later. Now, that wasn't the deal. That wasn't what's in writing. It was as soon as you do these 3 things, we will return your daughter.
Yeah.
So now get this, okay? So weekly, you're going to these visits in what I call a closet, okay? It's a room, but it's a closet. And they're torture. Absolutely torture. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. You get there, your child jumps you, literally, is clinging on to you. What's going on, mommy? Take me home. Your children learn right away they are alone in this world, and that whole ability, you know how you have that ability to comfort your children and make them feel safe and make them feel like you can do anything to protect them? It's gone, and you can never get it back. Never. Doesn't matter what you do. It's gone. And I was always open with my daughter. I always kept things age appropriate, but I always told her what was going on, and I told her the truth. Always. And so I told her, look, I came to an agreement with them. They said, if I do these things, you can come home. I set her up. I set her up, and they had me set her up. Every week, Mommy, how's it going? Mommy, what's happening with this? And I would keep her updated, okay, so I've done this so far. The next step is this. Dr. Rob, he's referred me to a counselor. I'm starting to go to that. I've got my meetings this many times a week, so it's almost done. It's almost done. And we're both like gripping onto each other, okay? When everything was done, I'll never forget this, okay? I'll never forget the day. Every day or every time we had a visit, she would say to me, Mommy, when am I coming home? And I would tell her, soon. This is what we're doing. This is what we're working on. On the 4th month, I had everything finished a month beforehand that they wanted. On the 4th month, I went into one of my meetings, and she didn't ask me when she was coming home. She gave up. She gave in, and it broke her. It broke her. I did get her back at that next court hearing. That was 6 months, but I got back a broken child. And her self-esteem was gone. She started blaming herself, thinking that there was something she could have done. She should have kicked the worker at the school. If she had kicked the worker and ran home, none of this would have happened. Now, you cannot convince a child that they couldn't have done anything. I tried. I really tried. I tried to tell her none of this was her fault, but she blamed herself. Her straight A's went to straight F's. Okay? My child went from here to here. She had no self-esteem, and they didn't give me any support. I asked, okay, this is not the child you took away. You took away a child that needed to be tested for gifted school. And yes, she was mourning the passing of her Nana, okay? But you gave me back a completely broken child. What do I do? You know what the worker told me? That's for you to figure out. Literally, in that arrogant tone, we don't do that. That's for you to figure out.
So what did you do?
And she walked out of my house.
How old was your daughter by then?
I was left on my own.
How old was your daughter by then?
She was 10 and a half. I was 27 and a half. I started calling different counseling organizations for children. Nobody would take the case because everybody knows that Children's Aid is mandated to have all the power. No one would take her case because nobody wanted to admit that this was all linked to their apprehension. Okay? So they wouldn't take the case.
What case? I don't understand. What did you do? What did you do with your daughter? She came home.
I was trying to get her counseling for the damage. I was trying to get her counseling.
What about school? Did she go to school?
She went back to school. Yep. She cut off everybody. She wanted no friends.
Yep.
She wouldn't eat lunch with anyone. She didn't want to speak with her teachers. She had a hoodie that she wore all the time. Okay. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but years later, when I fled Canada, okay, I spoke to an RCMP investigator. He's an officer that's in charge of child kidnapping. And do you know what he told me? Pamela, that is textbook how children react that are kidnapped and returned.
Yeah.
Children that we rescue that are kidnapped.
So what happened? I don't understand. Was she taken away again? I know you are now not in Canada. Yeah. You're in another country. I don't know if I could tell what country you're in.
I'm in Mexico.
So you're in Mexico. So how did you end up fleeing to Mexico? Something must have happened. So
yes. Now, okay, it's a bit of a long story, but okay. So what happens with the Children's Aid Society? Okay, and this is part of the game. The judges are in on this. This is how they rob you from your trial. Okay. So my trial, again, it wasn't booked. Instead, they force agreements on you, and they force you to cooperate. So when my daughter was returned It was under the force, basically, that I was going to deal with 6 months supervision. And in that 6 month supervision, they are allowed to barge into your home at any time, with or without a warrant.
Did you work?
Okay.
Were you working at the time?
No. You know what they had me do? They wanted me on welfare. One of the conditions was I had to apply for welfare.
But before then, were you working all the time?
Before then, I was working for the Royal Bank. I was trying to start my own business. I'm a credit advocate. I teach people how to get out of debt the right way. I teach people about the banking industry.
But you did that then,
so they can actually
when your mom was alive.
Oh, yeah.
You were working, you were supporting your own daughter.
This was what I was working on. Now, I hadn't actually launched my business yet. While I was fighting the Children's Aid, I fought them for over a 6-year period, okay? While I was fighting them, I went to school. I finally stopped listening to what they were trying to tell me, okay? Because like I said, they wanted me on welfare. They moved me into a public housing building. I had to get out of the house that I was in. That was in a really nice neighborhood. I had to move out of there and go into public housing. I had to stop working. I was working for a lawyer, okay? I had to stop working for the lawyer and I had to go on welfare. I had to get counseling because I was this helpless woman, according to them, okay? And I had to, they quote unquote, watch my internet use. I wasn't allowed internet.
So hang on a minute, your child was given back to you. Why did you not just say, screw this, I have her back, she can go to school, I'll carry on supporting her, and we'll just carry on living our lives? Why were you still entangled with the child
but
care?
That's because you're forced, you have no choice. You're under court order. You're under court order. Your child is handed back to you. It's on a temporary order while they supervise you. And what they do is they give you back a broken child and they wait for something to happen. They wait for the broken child to have a reaction. They wait for the broken child.
Just 1 second. At this point, you believe that they were in on this just for the money. So they saw your kid as a product to make money from your kid by, I guess, not trafficking her, but putting her in a foster home and getting paid for it.
No, I didn't fully understand that part at this point. If I knew a quarter of what I know now back then, I would have taken my daughter immediately and gotten out of the country. And that is what I help many families do now.
So I want to get to that.
Many.
So let's finish your story and get to what you're doing now.
So at this point, I was still... Okay, I knew they were lying, and I knew that they had gotten away with it with the 6 month thing, okay? But I still had faith that I'm going before a judge. So the judge is supposed to correct this. The judge is supposed to whatever. No, the judge is a part of it. Now, again, all of this is happening, and it's so hard to absorb it and process it and realize you are in an extremely dangerous situation and you have no way of defending yourself. I still believed that I could defend myself. I still believed that my evidence was going to matter. I still believed that the truth would overcome. That's what you're raised to believe, right? Like that's what the whole court system is for. So I kept trying. Now they came back and they took my daughter after the first 6 months supervision had passed, okay? Now, the worker that took my daughter, of course, I was protesting against her right from the get-go. She was lying about me. She was lying about my daughter. She was making up all these things. I wanted a worker that was going to work with us, that was going to help my daughter. They're supposed to be the Children's Aid Society. They're supposed to be child welfare. What the hell is going on? I want a real worker. She was young. She was fresh out of social work school. She still lived with her parents and had no child of her own. Who is she to determine these things about me and my daughter, right? And I fought for that. Do you know when they gave me a new worker? 2 days before the court case, before the court hearing, that they were supposed to close my file. So instead of closing my file after that 6 month supervision, like they convince you they're going to do, all they did was now file a new affidavit stating, well, Your Honor, we're requesting a 6 month extension because there was a breakdown in the relationship between Diana and Pamela, and we need to assign a new worker to the case.
Okay. So what did they achieve by that?
They had 6 months to do it. So the judge gave it to them. The judge gave them the 6-month extension of the supervision order. Now, me and my daughter, this entire 6 months, we're waiting for this to go away. Her and I, like, even though she's broken, she's still my child. We're still clinging on to each other. We're still trying to make it through this with no supports, no help, right? This isn't something I've ever dealt with in my life.
What did the judge achieve? Let's put it this way. Had things gone the way you now understand they should have in order to be more favorable for you, then you wouldn't have fallen out with Diana, the social worker, and they wouldn't have changed her to another one 2 days before. And what? And the judge would have not given them an extension because they wouldn't have asked for an extension?
Well, this is just it, right? They wouldn't have had an excuse. So they used the breakdown. We had the breakdown from day one. The second she apprehended my child, there was a breakdown. Do you know what I mean?
But they only mentioned
it wasn't something.
So it was another trick to get an extension. But what does an extension give them? What does it give them? The
extension gives them 6 months of being able to keep me under a microscope.
Which means what? So they want to find another reason. But what are they trying to they're trying to get you dig your grave and fall into it.
Destabilizing. It's all about destabilizing and undermining the family unit. So what they do is they have the right to go and see your child without you, okay, without a lawyer, without any supports. They go into the school, they pull the child out of class and interview them in school. Now, remember the gag order? I'm not allowed to speak out. I'm not allowed to identify myself. I am not allowed to state that I am receiving services, quote unquote. Remember, they're supposed to be aiding children. Okay, they call it services.
But that order is to do with if they were to take her away from you.
I'm not allowed to say any of that. Right, I'm not allowed to say any of that. But they're doing it by going into my daughter's school, pulling her out of class in the middle of the day, interviewing her at school. Now everyone in the school knows Children's Aid is involved in our life.
Okay.
Right? So now everybody's asking Deja, what's going on? Why are they doing this? How come they keep pulling you out of class? Blah, blah, blah. What's wrong with your mom?
And what's the purpose? What are they trying? What are they trying to achieve? They're trying for you to fall into a hole, which is what?
Right. Which is have your child act out. Have your child have a breakdown. Because if they do that, it's my fault.
And then they can take her away from you again.
My failure as mother. And then they apprehend again.
And then what?
Okay.
What do they gain from it? Money for putting her in the foster home.
Money. But this is the other thing. Now, with babies, there's time limits in the act, okay? That they're allowed to play with you and play with your family for certain times. Now, for babies, most families only have up until 9 months to try and get a trial. If they don't get a trial, we call it the clock, okay? When the clock runs out, it's automatic. This is why children are taken away from parents without a trial, because it's a back and forth game. And with older children, it's 24 months. With babies, it's as little as 9 months.
Okay.
So what they do is they hand your children back, okay? And they keep you on these supervision orders. They do all of these extremely invasive things, okay? So you're both having nightmares. You're both going through this immense torture. And the entire time, you have no right to a lawyer being there. You have no right to call your lawyer. Like most parents were on legal aid. We can't afford these lawyers to begin with. And so lawyers only get so many hours. That's all taken up in court.
Totally clear.
There's no way they're coming out.
That's crystal clear. Right? But what I'm trying to understand, and I'm almost there, I'm trying to get you to say it, with the babies, we know they want to get the babies and sell them for money. What would they gain from your daughter? Yes. How would they make money out of this?
It's the same thing. They're getting paid to house her. They're getting a bonus for apprehending her.
I see.
It's still money. They are a $3 billion industry, the foster care system, the group home system, the adoption system. Now, just the public side of it, we do not know to this day how much Children's Aid Society makes from adopting children. Because like I said earlier, that is the private corporation part. they don't have to disclose that publicly, okay? So we do not know how much they receive per baby. The only time we know is if it's done publicly through the actual foster care system. They make $3 billion a year in taxpayer money just from the foster care system and the group home system alone.
I see. Okay. So now moving on, what happened then?
They're still getting paid.
So what happened then?
So what happened was it's 24 months. That's all they need.
And then 24 months went by. Did you break down and give them an excuse?
4 months in care, and it's not all in once. It's in blocks. So they'll give the child back for 4 months, and then they'll take it for 6. And now that's 6 months on the clock, plus your other 6. Okay, so now there's 12. They only need 1 more year. And it's this game of back and forth,
what
back
happened?
and forth. Okay?
I understand.
Now, I finally got in contact with an organization who, I'm not going to say their name because they're actually exploitive, but thankfully I was able to get some good information out of them. And one of the things that they told me to do was record them, Pamela. Record them. So I did. In one of these meetings, I actually had them on tape. I recorded them intimidating my daughter out of going to court. Now, they originally took her when she was 10. She's now 12 at this point, okay? We've done the tossing back and forth game. The first time they took her was 6 months. The second time was 11 months, okay? And at this 11-month period, I had caught them on tape. My daughter's now 12, and under the law, she has the right to go to court. My daughter wanted to go to court. Now, just to backtrack for a quick second, my great uncle in my adoptive family is one of the few people in my family I really connected with. He was a justice of the peace at Old City Hall in Toronto. He is the man that gave me my sense of justice and injustice. From when I was a little kid, I used to cook with him in the kitchen because on top of being he's one of the most honorable people you ever meet in your life. Unfortunately, he had already passed away. When my family wanted me to baptize my daughter, even though he wasn't a religious man, I made him my daughter's godfather.
Yeah.
Okay. And she knew Uncle Leo. Okay. So, and this was how I had my understanding of criminal court. Like every time we had to shadow our parents, I didn't shadow my parents. I shadowed Uncle Leo. I went to court with Uncle Leo. I would cook in the kitchen with him every time we had family dinners.
So what happened then?
And by the time I was
She was 12 o'clock.
Well,
she was 12 years old.
Well, she was 12 years old. So in this meeting, there was all of these important people were in this meeting, and they didn't know in my little file folder, I had one of those accordion plastic folders.
Yep.
I had a tape recorder in there, and it was running. My daughter knew, and I knew, okay? But nobody else knew. And under Canadian law, the only one person in the party needs to be aware and needs to consent. Well, that's me. Mm-hmm. Right? A lot of people think, oh, you can't record without people's consent. Not under Canadian law. Mm-hmm. So I recorded them. And in this meeting, they went around the table introducing each other. So I had all of their names. And then the foster mother started talking about, at this point, we had weekend visits, torture. Just going to leave it at that. Torture. Yep. Okay? We had weekend visits, and the foster mother was making up these issues. Oh, well, every time I get Deja back, she's extremely sad. And it's because of an issue that comes up while she's on her visit. And my daughter's sitting right there. She's like, no, I'm sad because I don't want to leave my mom. Oh, now Deja, right? Now I'm asking her for specifics. What issues? Oh, I can't tell you that. I'm not allowed to disclose that to you. Well, she's telling you there's no. You won't disclose them to me, so obviously there's nothing, okay? And so we keep going on. Well, the worker ends up disclosing to my daughter that at the next hearing, they're going for crown wardship, okay? Now, like I explained to you, they need a reason. Crown wardship means they are terminating my rights as a parent.
Okay.
Okay? And they just told my daughter this. Now, this organization had told me if they say anything like that, immediately question what is their reason for risk. Okay, that's what they need. So they turned around and they said to my daughter, well, just so you know, Oh, wait, sorry. Before this, they were accusing me of forcing my daughter to go to court. Okay. On our weekend visits, I was sneaking her to meet with a child advocate that was actually an advocate outside of the family courts. And he was teaching my daughter her rights, and they were recording them on video. Okay. And he was teaching her rights about going to court and all of her real rights, not the fake rights that they teach kids where you have the right to shelter, you have the right to food. Basically, you don't have the right to love and care, but you have basic rights. That's all they teach the kids. This gentleman was teaching her all of her real rights and that she did have the right to go to court. So she was relaxed and a lot more calmer about going and standing up for herself and advocating for herself in court. Well, in this meeting, they were trying to claim that my daughter's stress levels had gone down immensely because I was no longer forcing her to go to court. Okay. They had no idea about these meetings. So then after that, they turned around and they said to my daughter, you know, it's really good, Deja, that you're not going to court because we never speak to the judges. And I'm literally quoting her, okay, on this. We never speak to the judges. Your mommy has a lawyer and you have a lawyer and we have a lawyer, and lawyers went to school for a long time to learn how to speak to the judges, and only they talk to the judges. So that's okay. You have your lawyer. You tell your lawyer what you want her to say, and you can stay at the foster home. You don't have to go. And so I turned around right away afterwards and I said, Deja, you know, that's not exactly true. There are times when I have to speak to the judge. And as long as you speak clearly and you speak politely, he speaks clearly and politely back to you. And I said, and you know what else? He reminds me a little bit of Uncle Leo. Well, she flew out of her chair. That's right, Mommy. Uncle Leo was a judge. I said, that's right, sweetie. And he wasn't scary, was he? No, Mommy. Immediately, that's when the worker said to my daughter, we're going for crown wardship. And right afterwards, I said, really? What is your reason for risk? And she turns to me and says, oh, we haven't thought about that yet. So I just caught them on tape admitting that they had my daughter in care for 11 months at this point for no even legitimate reason under their insane laws. Yeah. Okay. So I took that recording. I made an appointment with my MPP, which is my local provincial politician. Okay. I made an appointment with her and I brought in all of my evidence. I didn't know at the time, but she used to be the school superintendent before she became a politician. So she knew all about gifted testing. She knew all about kids qualifying for it. What, you know what I mean? So it was amazing. I didn't have my daughter tested by this point because everybody was fighting me. No, Children's Aid says, Pamela, I had no credibility. I had everything I was taken away from me as a mother. Yep. Because Children's Aid said, right? So I took all of my evidence. I took my daughter's Ontario school record. I took all of their court papers and I took that recording and I slammed it down on her desk and I said, you explain this to me. This is insane. How can this happen? And here, listen to this. I played the tape for her. So immediately, first of all, she gives me her card. And she says, you go into that school and you tell the principal, she knows me. You tell her that I said your daughter qualifies for gifted testing. And if she doesn't want to do the test, call me directly. Okay? They did the test. And not only was she gifted, they enrolled her in gifted school. Okay? Still didn't vindicate me in family court though. So then she calls this manager that was actually in. She was the head of the North York office that was in this interview. And she told her about, like, why can't Pamela file her evidence? What's going on in the courts? I don't understand. Now, it was made very clear to me that what Donna Cansfield, my MPP, was doing was a risk to her job. Like I said, nobody in the provincial government is allowed to intervene or interfere, okay? So she was going above and beyond and risking her job just by calling them. Yep. Okay. I was also risking myself because I had identified myself and my child. So that was a double Dewey. The only thing that kept them from doing anything was that tape recording.
But what do you mean you identified yourself? But your child hadn't been taken away from you yet.
And I said, I'm Pamela Palmer. My daughter, Dejalina, is in foster care. That's identifying myself. That's technically breaking the gag laws.
I see.
That is threatening me with putting me in jail.
Yeah, and 10,000 grand fine.
Right. You can't even go and identify yourself.
But you had the tape on them, which kind of saved you. So what happened then?
And I didn't really know that. I was just so angry by what was going on. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That I had to have somebody listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
So once they realized what was going on and I had this tape recorder, they literally gave me a new worker in a completely new office. Now, they have the Toronto Children's Aid Society, and then they have the Catholic Children's Aid Society. In the original first court papers, that was 2 years beforehand with Diana, the one that they took off of my file for breakdown in relationship, she put a paragraph in there that said, Pamela refuses to have services from the Catholic Children's Aid Society. And that's key, okay? Because technically my daughter was baptized, and she had the right, apparently, to go through the Catholic Children's Aid Society. And when I questioned Diana about that, she said, oh, I put that in there to stop you from being able to escape to them. Okay, this is how evil and vindictive these people are. So fast forward 2 years later, I've got this tape recorder. Now all of a sudden, they want to put me over to the Catholic Children's Aid Society. It's like, are you kidding me? After everything you've done? No, I want counseling services. I want support.
And where was your daughter
you to help me with
at that point? Where was she?
Sorry?
Where was your daughter?
My daughter, she was still in foster care. They returned her 2 weeks later, okay? After this had all gotten out with my MPP. They returned her 2 weeks later. This was just before Christmas. Just after Christmas, they filed in family court. They gave me a new worker in a new office. I refused being transferred to the Children's Aid Society, the Catholic, okay? I said no, because I was trying to get accountability, right? I got a new worker. Within a month, they got me counseling at the George Hull Center for me and my daughter, okay? They all of a sudden were helping pay for art classes. They were going to do all of these things, okay? All of a sudden, they were going to become the child welfare system, and they were going to help support this child. They went to court. Literally, instead of a big book, it was a paragraph that they're closing the file, and the judge rubber stamped it. Now, I thought I was clear, okay? During this time, I went to school, launched my own business, won Entrepreneur of the Year, okay? None of that mattered. None of that made a difference. They used it against me in court because I wasn't following their plan of staying on welfare.
Yep.
Okay, literally, they used it against me. So I thought, okay, fine, I'm going to go on. I'm going to run my business. I'm going to take advantage of these opportunities that I have coming up with my business. Enterprise Toronto had hired me. Even different consulates and embassies had hired me to come in to speak to new Canadians, to teach them about how to properly manage their relationship with the bank, how to use credit cards safely and securely, you know, things like that. It was phenomenal.
I want to move on to what you're doing with mothers these days. So we need...
Right. Okay, well, they came back and they took my daughter. I got engaged to an American man, and we had relocated temporarily to the United States. I still kept my apartment in Toronto because I wasn't sure where it was going to work, right? So we had relocated to Chicago, and it was working really well. All of a sudden, my daughter was showering.
And she was living with you in Chicago? She was living in Chicago with you?
Yes, because they closed my file. This was almost a year later. Okay. We had moved on with our lives. I thought Children's Aid was gone.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was trying to get her registered into a school in the Chicago area, and I was trying to get her to Ontario social work, or her Ontario school record, right? And so the school's trying to call and get it. They don't know where it is. And so I called the last school that Children's Aid had stuck her into, all right, and told them, we're living in the States now. I met somebody else, like, we're living here. I need her Ontario school record. Now, I had to go back to Canada for a 2-week period of time. And being like, knowing how evil the CAS is, I went to a lawyer first. Okay. And I asked, can I bring my daughter with me or can I leave her here? She wants to stay here.
Here is
We're
where?
trying to get her into school. And here was in Chicago, in the United States. Okay. And it was with my fiance at the time. Okay. And so she said, no, you are under the state law. You can leave your daughter with anybody over the age of 18 who you see fit. You don't have to go to court. You don't have to do anything like that, because if so, the reason why the law is set up like this, parents would have to go to court every time they wanted to send their kids to camp. Parents would have to go to court every time they wanted to go to the movies. So just to be safe, she did up 2 statements, okay, that were sworn to. One was for me, one was for John, and it all had to do with the care of Deja. This was for 2 weeks. And so there I was, okay? So anyway, I went back to Toronto, okay? And while I was there, I contacted that school again. And I said, I need her OSR. I'm here in Toronto. I'm returning to Chicago. I want it to take it back with me. Get it together. They called the Children's Aid Society to report that I was in Canada and my daughter was in the States. So Children's Aid goes and calls DCFS. DCFS won't do anything.
What's DCFS? Remind me, what's DCFS?
DCFS stands for the Department of Child and Family Services. They're supposed to be the equivalent to the Children's Aid Society. Okay. Now, they were trying to tell DCFS that I had abandoned my daughter. Go get her. She's in danger. They said, well, you have no disclosure from the child. You have no evidence of that. We can go and ask Pamela, and my fiance's name at the time was John. We can go and ask them if we can interview her, you know, but we can't just go there and take the child. So they weren't happy with that. And they were trying for weeks, literally, to get them to do that. So I went back to Chicago. I was there in Chicago for about a month, and then I returned again to Toronto. Now, remember, I still had an apartment there. We were still trying to, you know what I mean? In case things weren't going to work out with us in Chicago, we were all going to move to Toronto. So I was basically maintaining 2 things. I also travel for business. I was doing facilitation courses for Toronto Enterprise. Okay. All normal things a family does, right? Like sometimes a mother or a father needs to travel, needs to do business, right? Normal things. So when I went back to Toronto, as soon as they found out I was back in Toronto and my daughter was in the United States, they made a police report to the Toronto police claiming that I had sold my daughter to some guy from the internet. Literally. So they accepted my daughter. I still didn't have her OSR. The school still registered her. This was her first day of school. Okay. They registered her into school and she came home. She called me. Hi, Mom, I'm going to do my homework. I'll call you later. Okay, great. And then my next call was from an FBI agent. Pamela, why did you leave your daughter with John? Excuse me? He's my fiance. I can leave her with my fiance. What are you talking about? I had no idea yet what was going on. All I knew was the FBI was calling me and asking me why I left my daughter with John. Now, I don't know. A lot of people that know about this stuff know about Operation Underground Railroad. That is ex-Navy SEALs. Okay. They are, it's an American group of ex-Navy SEALs, and their job is to investigate child trafficking rings. And they do it worldwide. Okay. They were actually involved in my case. My daughter and my ex-fiance actually met them. Okay. And they took my daughter from the house. Again, I don't know. All I know is an FBI agent called me. I'm trying to call them like crazy. I'm not getting any answer on the phone. I didn't even know they had my daughter in custody. Nobody told me anything. All they did was ask me was why I did this. Well, because I'm her mother. And I had to come back home. So they ended up doing a big investigation. Okay. And they found that it was bullshit. I was never arrested and charged. My ex-fiance was never arrested and charged, but they didn't know. These are feds, okay? They never contacted my family lawyer who had written up those statements. They had those statements. They knew about them, but they were claiming people have faked these things, okay? But they ended up investigating and interrogating my ex. He finally said, I am not going to talk to you anymore until you go talk to that little girl. My daughter was 14 at this point, okay? And so they finally did. He finally refused. Now, originally, he signed away his Miranda rights. He answered all their questions, except the inappropriate ones, okay? Things that were private about us and about our relationship, he's like, no, not answering that. That has absolutely nothing to do with Deja and about the care with her. She is not in our bed. She is not in our private life. Like, I am not answering those questions. Don't you dare, okay? So finally, he shut down and he said, I'm not answering any more questions until you go talk to her. So they did. They went and talked to my daughter. 10 minutes later, they came back. We are so sorry, Mr. Montgomery. You know that she calls you dad? And she's like, I know. Now you understand. So they were going to release everything. They called me at 11 o'clock that evening. The FBI called me back. Pamela, we are so sorry. We've had John and Deja in our custody. We cannot release Deja to John, right? But come and get her. We will give her to you. Go back to John's house. We apologize profusely.
Yep.
Okay? So I was at first freaking out going, what do you mean you can't give her to John? Give her back to John. It's legal. Contact my lawyer. But I can't argue with him. I have an hour to catch the bus downtown Toronto to get to Chicago. Okay. So the FBI agent, this was a woman. I don't remember her name. We're talking a long time ago. My daughter's now 27. Okay. This is when she was 14. So the FBI agent stayed with her overnight. The FBI, the Homeland Security, Immigration, and the Homewood Police were all involved in this investigation. Okay. Now, Homeland Security has an office in North Chicago, and they have an internet sex crimes unit in that building. Now, that's where they kept my daughter with the FBI agent. They had a bed there, and so my daughter was there. She was supposed to be sleeping. I don't know if she slept at all that night, but I was basically on the bus overnight going back to Chicago, and when I got there the next day, I called the FBI agent first to tell her, I'm here. She said, okay, John's coming to get you. Listen, Pam, I have to go home. I'm so tired. I've been up all night, but she's here. Everything's fine. You're going to get here. They're going to release you to her, and you're going to go home. What the FBI didn't know is CAS had caught wind that I was coming back and getting Deja. They got the manager of the internet sex crime on the phone, and they had him on the phone from 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay? Pamela does this all the time. She takes her daughter to strange countries and abandons them with strange men. You cannot let her go back to her mother. She's abusive. She's neglectful. She's all these horrible things, not a shred of evidence, okay? So it's now 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We get to the office. I get to see my daughter for 5 seconds. We hug. These Homeland Security agents pull us apart, okay? Put me and John into a small cafeteria, and I don't know where they put Deja. We're stuck in this room with 2 to 3 agents around us until 11 o'clock that night. The manager calls me into his office. I'm escorted in there. Children's Aid Society is on speakerphone, okay? And they notify me over the phone that they are taking my daughter because I had abandoned her in the States with John. And that Homeland Security was going to take temporary care, custody of her until they can come and get her. And right away, I started screaming for political asylum. I was yelling for everything and anything. I picked up the phone and told her, I'm not even going to speak to you without a tape recorder. They knew me so well by then. I was tape recording everything. I slammed the phone back down. I was grabbing onto the desk, telling this manager, you can't do this. There is no evidence of this. Like, what are you doing to us? Call the FBI. Call the people that just did this investigation. There's no proof. There's no charges. He didn't care. So while I was in there, he called DCFS, which is the Department of Child and Family Services, and got the worker on the phone that Children's Aid was previously trying to get them to take my daughter. Okay. Now, this was the best part. I will never forget this. So I'm sitting there and I'm still trying to advocate and fight and you know what I mean? And get him to give us our rights, give us a lawyer, give us something. Okay. And the worker, as soon as she figures out who the family is, she starts screaming at him. Children's Aid has been calling us for weeks. We told them no. They had no disclosure. They had no evidence. We told them we wouldn't do this. Yes, we will put the child in temporary housing because you don't have appropriate place for her. But this is on you. This has nothing to do with us. Now, at this time, well, as soon as she started screaming at the manager of the Homeland Security Department, the two agents that were behind me tried to carry me out. I grabbed on his desk and I held on for dear life. I wanted to hear every word she said. She was the only ally that I had ever seen in 5 years now, okay? And so I wanted to hear everything that she had to say. She hung up on him, okay? And they did put my daughter into temporary housing with DCFS. John and I went immediately home. My daughter back then had MSN chat. I don't remember, Hotmail chat, whatever it was, way back in the day. And so she had access to a computer where they were keeping her. We had no idea where she was, but she had access to being on the internet. In the meantime, I knew what they were accusing me of. I went to my lawyer. She gave me a letter stating that, in fact, I went above and beyond the law, and in no way what I did could be considered abandonment, okay? And I got so much evidence, okay, that what I did was legit. I was not abandoning my daughter in any way, what, shape, or form. And when my daughter disappeared from the internet, that's when we figured they were taking her back to Canada. Now, get this. No immigration hearing. No hearing before a judge. Nothing. My daughter was trafficked across international borders with a single hearing. There was nothing rubber stamping this saying that this was legitimate. And that's what we get. When I say we are equal to cattle, I am not kidding you. If I was a criminal, my daughter would have had a hearing. If they had actually charged me with a crime, my daughter would have had a hearing. She would have been given a lawyer. She would have actually been treated like a human being. But instead, they just moved her across international borders without anything. And I'm not the only one this has happened to. This has happened to hundreds and hundreds of families. When I say there is only 6 countries in the world that is safe for us, those 6 countries in the world are the only ones we will get hearings in. They take our children, they put them on planes, and they take them back to these illegal closed courts where we have no rights. We have no fair hearings. We can't speak out. We can't do anything.
So she was flown back to Canada.
She was brought back to Canada, and I was put before the same judge again. Now get this.
In the family court.
I went to the Toronto police. Yeah, I went to the Toronto police as soon as we arrived. Like I said, you get 5 days to appear in court, okay? I got a referral to what was supposed to be a good lawyer. She was better as far as writing letters. She wrote very wordy letters. So there was a lot more proof as far as writing goes, okay? And I'm not cooperating. But I went back to court. I went to the Toronto police first immediately when I arrived, and I got a copy of the police report, okay? Because I knew they made the report to the Toronto police. So I paid the money. I did the Freedom of Information request, and I got a copy of the officer's notes stating that they had originally accused me of selling my daughter online. Okay. Then I had all the evidence from the United States, the fact that she was registered in school, the fact that they had done a test there and they too found her gifted. They put her in all advanced classes. I got the letter from my lawyer claiming that I went above and beyond the law. And in fact, what I did was an abandonment. We get into court. Now, normally, you know how you're supposed to serve everybody? There's this whole system where you're supposed to be given notice. You're supposed to be given what they're accused of before you go into court. Not in family court. They give it to you in the hallway just before you're going to appear to the judge. 100% of the time. Okay? They get away with this. So you're not prepared. I went prepared anyway. I had all my evidence. I had quickly written up an affidavit, and that was stating about what happened. Their affidavit, they changed the story, Michael. Pamela has become engaged, and we need to approve Pamela's new fiance as a proper caregiver for Deja.
So they changed the whole thing.
All my evidence, they changed the whole thing. All of my evidence couldn't be filed. None of it.
Because that was relating to, what was your evidence about? It was about whether you abandoned your child or not.
My evidence was, right.
I see.
Right.
So they tricked you again.
They changed the entire story. And this is all legal. This is all legal. And so it was a mess. So now it became all about my ex-fiance. Now in this first hearing, now when I mentioned his name, Justice Marvin Zucker, as my JP's name in family court. During the years that I was fighting him, this justice of the peace was found guilty of altering court transcripts. Okay? He still sat on the bench. This is how insane these courts are. That is like the biggest no-no. That is you putting yourself before the robe you wear and before the bench you sit. Okay? That is like so huge. But he was found guilty. And during the time when I was fighting Children's Aid, this was determined. All they did was take his court support staff and another JP's court support staff and switch them. That's all they did. He got nothing. Like, he still got to keep his job, even though he just broke a massive rule. So what happened was, in this first hearing, when we went in there, of course, I'm trying to speak about what happened to us. Judges don't care. They only care to hear the matter before them. And the matter before them was what the Children's Aid Society filed, which is my fiance. And right off the bat, he says to me, Pamela, the last thing we need is problems with American men. What? Like, what? How is this even legal, let alone, like, that's how arrogant they are.
So
that's how
what happened then?
Little you matter.
So what happened then?
Well, he gave them temporary custody of my daughter, okay, under the guise that they now needed time to approve my fiance as a proper caregiver, okay? We went through all of the visitations. We went through all of the crap, okay, literally. We went through all of it. And in the end, my fiance left thinking that he was protecting me and thinking that he was protecting my daughter, because he took it all as this was all his fault. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And because that's what they were blaming it on. They were blaming it on him. He had no firsthand experience. He knew my story. He knew all the things that I told him. And I told him, do not trust them. Do not give them an inch. You know what I mean? But again, to people that haven't actually been affected by this, it's unbelievable. You know what I mean? They don't believe it until they go through it themselves. Well, by the end of it, he thought that if he just returned to Chicago, they would stop it and return Deja to me. Mm-hmm. And of course they didn't.
Of course.
So she finally walked out of care. Okay.
How old was she?
She was still 14. Okay. They took her in October from the United States. John had returned to the United States by the end of January. Okay. So we were there November, December, January, going through all of their crap. And he finally left by the end of January. I was devastated, just devastated. Okay. And so she left, she walked out of foster care by the end of June. That's when school had ended. Okay. And she came home. Now, kids have the right to do that. They're intimidated to not to do it, but she did it. She came home and she was home with me for 2 months. For 2 months, they didn't do anything. They didn't come take her back. They had the power to. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't. They didn't file in court. They didn't do anything. They waited until she was back in school. Now, come September, I wanted to get her back into the gifted school. Okay. I wanted to re-register her in there. I called the school board. They said no, because as far as we're concerned, Children's Aid is still their caregiver. The school that they forced my daughter to attend was 3 hours away. My daughter had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, leave the house by 6:10 to take the bus and the subway to the opposite side of the city in order to attend school. Okay, that's abuse, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't let her transfer to any school, whether it was the regular
Why not?
public school.
What did they?
Or
How
the
did they
gifted
justify
school.
their decision not to let her?
Because as far as they were concerned, she wasn't supposed to be in my care. So no, we're not letting her switch schools.
Ah, so the school
Even
she
though
was
they
in.
had the legal power.
So the school she was in was a.
While she was in foster care.
So it belongs to like the
it
system.
It was a regular high school.
It belongs to like the foster system.
No, this is the regular. This is a regular public high school.
But why does letting her go to the gifted school imply that she would be under your care?
Because that would be listening to me, not the Children's Aid Society. And the Children's Aid Society was saying no.
But why did they care? Why did the Children's Aid Society? Again, because they just want to create problems.
Because the Children's Aid Society, they have that much power.
But so is it the same reason that they want to break you and create problems and eventually break the child and end up keeping them in their care because they get money for it?
Yes. Now, not with the schools. The schools are just absolutely terrified of the Children's Aid Society because they have almighty power. Okay. There's actually laws stating if you are a teacher, a doctor, a social worker, a whatever, like all the professionals, if you actually get a trial, trying to get a professional to testify on your behalf is next to impossible because they go after you. They go after your license. They report you to the college. They report you to your governing body. Okay. They have ultimate power, no oversight. There's nowhere, just like we can't complain, either can professionals. So they try to avoid them. They don't want to touch cases that have to do with CAS. They just do whatever the hell CAS says, because if they don't, they know they're going to come down on them.
Okay. So let's move on with the story. So what happened then?
So my daughter had to travel all the way this way to the school. Now, under regular law, if somebody wants to interview your child, if someone wants to, especially the police, okay, they have to have your permission, right? They have to notify a parent. The schools don't notify you. They went into my daughter's school 4 days out of 5 days every week for 2 months. Deja, you need to come back to care. What if your mom meets another man? What if your mom gets another fiance? What if your mom decides to move? What if your mom? And she held them off. I am so proud of her. She didn't tell me because she was trying to protect me. I'm proud of her. She held them off for 2 months.
But where was she sleeping?
2 months. She was sleeping in my home.
But so she had to travel from your home to that school. I see.
To the school and then back. She was leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning and coming back at 7 o'clock at night.
Was it a closer school to where you lived?
Yes, but like I said, the school board would not let me transfer her. Because Children's Aid was still saying, no, can't do it. She's in our care. We say she still goes to that school. So abuse, right? Complete abuse.
Yeah.
And then they were pulling her out of class every day, trying to tell her. And so finally, this was again in the end of October, they finally convinced her to come back to care under the guise that when she was 16 years old, they would give her her own apartment and they promised to leave me alone. She thought she was doing it to protect me. They abused that child so badly. They took a child who'd never been in a fight, never been done drugs, never drank. She was a straight A student. She wasn't interested in boys. She was interested in friends. And they took her, and after they got crown wardship of her, okay, to protect me, they put her in a group home. The same thing like I was in. These children were all having sex. They were all breaking the law. They were all doing drugs. They were all drinking. And they immediately started attacking my daughter because she was different. They started picking on her. I just unbelievably. Every time they would get in trouble, it was my daughter's fault because she was different. She wasn't like them. They immediately pegged her as the rat, okay, because she was never been arrested. She wasn't being brought back to the group home by police. They did the opposite of what they promised her. One foster mother that we had during this whole time was trying so hard to fight to get Deja out of there. They threatened her with her job. Okay. Now, my daughter started calling the provincial advocate's office, which is now closed. Thank God. They were the trashiest piece of shit you've ever seen in your life. Okay. And I worked hard on that for years. She called the provincial advocate's office, constantly leaving messages about the abuse and about what was going on. And all they did was return phone calls. But of course, their number comes up on call display. So the group home doesn't answer the call. They let it go to voicemail. They don't tell the child that they called them back. Instead, they punish them without even telling them why. So my daughter was now not only getting punished by the kids, but she was also getting punished by the group home employees. I was calling the provincial child advocate's office insanely, talking to her advocate, saying, look, she's in this group home. She's told me this is the address. My daughter was stealing money in order to be able to call me from the payphone at school. And so she was only able to talk to me for the little tiny breaks in between classes. But she would call me, Mom, this is the address of where I'm staying. I have to get out of there. It's horrible. Now, this was going on. They took her full custody of her away a month before she was 16. The law back then was once they turn 16, they can't do it. They don't have grounds anymore. They literally terminated my rights 1 month before she turned 16, put her into the group home. So they're torturing her.
And they're making money all this time? Are they making money out of it?
All this time. Now, remember, they've deemed her as well as disabled.
Yeah.
That's more money. Okay? They get a bonus for children that are disabled. Okay? Even though they don't do anything with it, they pocket it, they get a bonus for that.
Yeah.
So now, fast forward to September. Everybody knows my daughter is at her wit's end. She's about to run. They showed up at my door with the police and they told me, Pamela, you are no longer your mother's daughter. We have full custody of her. You have no rights to her. If your daughter runs and she comes here and you dare to open your door to her, we will have you arrested and put in jail because you are not an approved caregiver. I fled the country 2 weeks later. I was gone. 2 weeks to the day. I was gone.
Why?
I was 80 pounds by this point. I was sleeping once every 3 to 4 days and only for a short period of time because the physical pain and the torture that you go through, Michael, I was terrified I wouldn't wake up. I was terrified that I would die in my sleep. It hurt so bad.
The fact that you had to accept that you are no longer legally your child's mother, and the fact that she was 16.
And I would be a
what does the
criminal.
law say? If she turns 16, isn't she allowed to freely see whoever she wants, even you as a? I mean, she could see anyone.
They terminated. This was the thing. If they hadn't terminated my rights, they would have had no more power to get her. But they terminated my rights 1 month before she turned 16.
And had they not done it,
under the law,
so if they wouldn't have done it and she would have turned 16 before they terminated, then the whole thing would have been over and they wouldn't have had no rights over her and she could have come home straight away.
That's right.
So by terminating the rights, it's indefinite, forever?
It's indefinite.
What, even if she's 40, she can't see you? That's ridiculous.
They didn't release her from care. Most people think that they release these children from care when they're 18. Okay?
Yeah.
That is not true. Some children, yes, as soon as they're 18, they kick them right out and they're on the streets. Okay? We know for a fact 85% of the children that are on the streets. Now, there's a lot. Okay? I understand in Israel, there's a total of 3,000 homeless people, right? There is not a big homeless population. In Canada, 85% of the children, and there is a lot of them, are all foster kids and group home kids that are escaping immense abuse. Only 15% of them were like me, that were escaping our families. 85% of them are from the system. And they're still pocketing that money. They're still collecting that money. 1/3 of the adult homeless population are ex-foster kids. You can survey any prison that you want, juvenile or adult. 85 to 96% of the people in those prisons are foster care children. When I say they institutionalize these kids right away, they do. It's money. It's a big money scheme, even after they grow up. Now, most kids, yes, they kick them out when they're 18. They knew me and my daughter had a close connection. They kept her until she was 25.
Where?
Under their care. What they do is most kids, if once they get their ID or whatever, they go and apply for welfare if they're lucky. If not, they become street and homeless people. They become addicted to drugs and they just get lost. Okay. What they did with her was they made her so dependent on them. They finally allowed her to go live. Now get this. This is the best part. You want to know where they released her to? The original house that they made me move out of the first time that they apprehended her. They put her back into that house and they gave her money instead of welfare. Welfare, she would have gotten a lot less. Okay, so they were giving her about $300, $350 more than what welfare would have done. But in order for her to receive that money and not be living below the poverty line, okay, she had to basically still abide by them. She had to live as if she was still a foster care child. They did not sign her out until she was 25.
And they were getting money for that from taxpayers' money?
She was getting the money.
Sorry?
Yeah. They were still receiving money for her.
I see. So why did you flee the country? You said you fled 2 weeks after she turned 16.
I fled because I'm a very strong woman, but I cannot keep my daughter close. My daughter, there was no way. And there was no way I was going to allow them. I've never been arrested. I have never been charged with a crime in my life. There was no way I was going to allow them to turn me into a criminal for being her mother. And Michael, there's no way if she came and knocked on my door that I would keep it closed. There's no way.
So you knew you rather flee the country and not.
I fled the country 2 weeks later. I met with her the day before I left. Okay.
Legally?
And it was a
legally? Or were you not allowed to?
No. We were not allowed to.
Okay.
I met with her the day before I left. We snuck a visitation at a mall. Okay. And I told her that I'm going to Mexico and that I'm going to have us a home. And if she ever wants to come and knock on my door, nobody will arrest me for opening it, and that she will be safe. And I told her that if she misses me, to look up, because even though I'm not here, we're still under the same stars. And so just look up, and we're still looking at the same stars. Since getting out, I've had a second child. She was born here in Mexico. The Mexican Constitution protects her from the Children's Aid Society. If I had had my daughter in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in anywhere in Europe, Africa, half of Latin America is safe for us, and that's the only places in the world. They would have came and kidnapped my daughter under the guise that she has a right to a Canadian citizenship. She has a right to be raised in Canada. They would have given her her own Canadian passport and trafficked her across borders without a single hearing, without a single trial.
So all these countries cooperate with the child care society, child aid society?
We cannot live in any country that was ever under Crown rule. They all have the same laws. They all have the same system. Even if they're no longer, like the Caribbean islands, they're all completely out of the question for us. Okay. One of the families that I helped to escape years ago, all right, they got caught just landing in a stopover flight to Trinidad. Okay. They were heading to Guatemala, right? Now, Guatemala, if they go there, they get a trial. They get a hearing in front of a judge, and the judge wants to see evidence. Risk is not an acceptable reason to take children, okay? They underestimated, even though I told them you cannot land in any country that was ever under Crown rule, they thought a stopover was fine, okay? They were not only held by airport security, they were handed over to Canadian police, the RCMP, on the tarmac of the airport. No immigration hearing, no criminal hearing, no nothing, okay? They were zip-tied. They were handcuffed and put on a Canadian private plane and brought back to Canada.
Unbelievable.
0 criminal charges.
Yep.
0 criminal charges. And their case was actually in the news.
So
Nothing's been done.
So you've been living in Mexico. Has your daughter come and has she visited you at all?
No, I wish.
So where is she now?
She's so broken. She's still in Toronto. She has cuts from her throat all the way to her ankles. She has very little self-esteem. She's trying to go back to school. She's trying to get into college. Now, this is a child that I swear to you, man, she's one of the minds that could actually help change our world. And she's one of the most selfish people you will ever meet in your life. And it's just been so destroyed. She's trying, but she's so broken up here that her and I can't even really talk because, again, they've broken her down so badly that according to the system, I'm worthless. And so it's all supposed to be about the child, but to the point that you're not allowed to be happy. Your feelings don't matter. And I'm sorry, but that's how my adoptive family was. You know what I mean? You just have to do everything to keep them happy because you're lucky that you're here in the first place. Just appreciate everything. You know what I mean? Like it's that whole mindset. And so she sent me some really terrible messages over Christmas time, and I can't even read them. You know what I mean? But just basically stating that my feelings don't matter. I was angry at her because she ignored me for 6 months. She didn't return any of my calls. She didn't return any of my messages. Like, who am I? I don't deserve to be treated like that. And she basically said, too bad. And that's what they've taught her. You know, I'm not worthy of anything. And yet she claims that she's getting over it. She claims that she's moving on. But I know that's not the fact because that's not my daughter. That's not who Deja is. I know who the real Deja is. And they've just they've devastated her so badly. She's had to change and become this different person in order to survive everything that she's gone through.
Are they still supporting her? Is she still receiving
No. No.
benefits?
She's on social services. She's on social services, and she doesn't get very much help at all.
I see.
Not at all.
Okay. So tell me about other cases. I mean, what exactly? I mean, I understand. So you're in Mexico and you're helping different mothers and families in similar situations back in Canada. You're helping them flee before it's too
Canada,
late.
the United States, pretty much the first world wherever these child traffickers and this illegal crap goes on. I know firsthand that there is no defending yourself. Like literally, if there was a way, if there was somebody that could intervene, I have filed all the way up to the federal court. I have tried myself to challenge these illegal laws in the federal courts and using constitutional arguments. And this is the best way I can describe it, okay? My case law was so tight, Michael. If it was a butt, it would have whistled, okay? Literally, if it was a butt, it would have whistled. And all they responded back was, no, not our jurisdiction. No case law, no nothing, stating why, just no, not our jurisdiction.
Who are you helping?
They make too much money.
Who are you helping? Who should contact you?
What I do with parents nowadays is whether it's new and they've just found out, like parents, basically mothers mostly, that have just had their babies kidnapped, okay? Usually I'm working with the grandparents because the mom is still in the hospital. They're trying to recover from the birth of their child, whether they had it naturally or cesarean. They're absolutely devastated. And usually it's the grandparent that finds me, okay? So the first thing we do is we file that affidavit that I told you about with the case law and all that stuff for the immediate return of the child, so the mother can return status quo. And what we do after that is we get her the hell out of there, okay? Because there's no due process. They will come back for them. Now, that's it. Once they go to one of these countries.
To Mexico?
Mexico, Guatemala, Peru, Uruguay, Argentina, and Venezuela. Those are the only countries in the world that are safe for us.
It's amazing. It's amazing that these third world countries... Sorry?
Those are the only countries where we will get a fair hearing.
Basically, the Child Aid Society can't influence...
They can't
get you extradited back.
A hearing.
Yeah, without a hearing.
Right, without a hearing. Without a hearing. And if they do try to get a hearing, there's only one time that they actually chased families. That was to Guatemala, but that's because case was in the media. So they had to. They had no choice because the media was already following the case. They would look like idiots if they just let them go.
And what happened? Was there a hearing?
The Guatemalan courts sided with the families. They told them, you have no evidence.
So what did the media say? They probably reported the Guatemalans as the bad guys.
The media dumbed it down a little bit, okay? Because the judge was very clear. You have no evidence to take these children away from these families. The children are allowed to stay here with their family, and they have to check in with us because they were going to process them. Like if they were going to stay as visitors or if they were going to start with their residential thing, they needed to check in with the Guatemalan authorities.
Yeah.
Okay. They protected these families and these children. They told them, you have no evidence that, what was the words that she used? You have no evidence that justifies separating these children from these families. Yeah. They have the right to stay with their parents here in Guatemala.
So there's 6 countries. Now, so how do people get to you? I mean, you say you help these mothers flee just in the last second that they have a chance to do so before.
That's one. That's one form. One form is with the babies and with that affidavit. Okay. Mm-hmm. The other one is like parents like me, where it was the back and forth game. okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's we're giving them to you now, and that's the clock, right? Basically, they're trying to get the clock to run out, because once they reach 24 months, it's automatic, and they determine your rights based on summary judgment, and now they're crowns, okay? They're property of the state. Now, with those parents that are already caught up in it, what I get them to do is throw in the towel, pretend they're throwing in the towel, give up, tell them don't fight anymore. We're going to do whatever you want in order to get unsupervised visits. Okay? Because this is all still temporary. They're not signing their children over. They're just convincing the social workers for the time being that they're not going to fight. And in this way, they're going to get an unsupervised visit. As soon as they get that unsupervised visit, they get the hell out.
They just run.
Technically, yeah, exactly. Run. And I warn parents, not all parents do it, because some of them still hang on to this belief that they're innocent, that they'll get their day in court. You know what I mean? And I try everything in my power to warn them. I try to introduce them to other families that are willing to talk. Not a lot of them are, because they're out, they're safe. You know what I mean? They don't want to expose themselves. They don't want to put themselves in danger. So I try to introduce them and get that kind of support. But some families still hang on to, no, I'm innocent. I haven't done anything wrong. I'll get my day in court. Yep. This is going to be turned around. And it just breaks my heart. But for the other ones, they follow. They do exactly what I tell them. They start selling their stuff. They start dwindling down the things that they need. I tell them to get online work, whether it's teaching English online, whatever it may be. You don't need to make a lot of money in order to live very comfortably in these countries. Dollars convert very well into pesos and into whatever. You can live comfortably, even though in there you would be living in poverty. Down here, you actually have a life. So I help them find online work. I tell them to start selling them stuff. And examples I give them. Do you have a dining room table and chairs? Yes, sell it. You don't need it. You can eat sitting on your sofa or sitting on a sofa chair. Sell your sofa, keep your sofa chair, sit on your sofa chair and eat over your lap. Do you have a bed with a fancy box spring and all that stuff? Yes, you don't need it. Sell it. You can sleep on your mattress on the floor.
And that's just to get ready to flee.
That's exactly it. And to get as much cash together as they can, pack their suitcases now, know how much they're going to bring. And as soon as they get that unsupervised visit, disappear. Now, I didn't know this at the time. Like, again, when I was going through this and I was still in Canada, there was one visitation that me and my ex-fiance went on. And there was a young couple that was beside us. And again, you're not allowed to talk to each other. Okay? I've broken that rule so many friggin' times. I didn't care. You would not believe like how I manhandled these workers, and they deserved it. Once I realized this is a bunch of bullshit, the gloves were off. Okay? It was like hockey. I'm shaking off the gloves. Let's go. I'm taking you down. Now, there was a young couple that was beside us, and they were there for their visitation with their 4-year-old daughter. Oh my God, Michael, was she beautiful. Beautiful, blonde, long ringlets, gorgeous blue eyes. All I could see was, holy shit, she's going to end up in the hands of a sex trafficker. Okay? I knew immediately. I told them when the worker that sits behind the little check-in desk, she went in the back for some reason or into the bathroom. I don't remember. But I told them, do yourself a favor, get them to let you go to the coffee shop down the street and disappear. They're going to take your child. That family listened to me. That was the first time I helped a family escape, and I didn't even really know at the point what I was doing. But they listened. They asked if they could go down to the coffee store, to the coffee shop. They wanted to get donuts. In Canada, we have a coffee chain called Tim Hortons, and they're everywhere. Okay? So they said, oh, yeah, you could take her. This was in the wintertime. The next day in the news, there was a report saying that this family had disappeared with their 4-year-old child from within Scarborough. They were never found. They got away.
Wow.
They got away.
Okay.
Now, another mother who I knew, our children had visitations on the same day during the week. Her daughter showed up with bruises. And the first time she asked her daughter about what was going on, the workers immediately jumped up and they grabbed the child, dragged her out of the, it's like the reception area, okay? They dragged the child out of the reception area into the meeting room, okay? And they screamed at the mother, "Don't you dare ask any questions like that again. That is inappropriate. If you do that, we are going to cancel your visits." Like yada, 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 yada. It was horrifying. They just jumped on her, okay? Well, her daughter kept showing up with bruises. Now, her and I, again, you're not supposed to talk. I didn't give a shit. I broke that rule. We still bonded. There was, in the wintertime, a lot of times they would cancel your visitations because there wasn't a driver. They never called to tell you this, okay? Because it's part of their thing, like, oh, well, we have to make sure you're going to show up. Because if not, right, if weather stops you, they file against you in court. Mother didn't appear for 3 visits. And they don't say why, but they use that, right? So anyway, you have to go no matter what. You're not told when visits are canceled. You're not told when your children aren't coming. You find out when you get there. So me and this mom, we used to cry together and we would hug each other and comfort each other when our children weren't there. And when her daughter was coming in, the bruises were getting worse and worse. At one point, her arm was broken. And again, she couldn't ask her daughter a single question or they were going to cut her off. So I learned this tactic from her. Now, I do different, okay? But she kissed ass. She got an unsupervised visit. And her and her daughter jumped off the bridge onto a highway. And they're dead. That was the only way that she thought that she could protect her child.
Shocking.
I mean, like, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
So what can...
And I took from that.
What can be done?
I helped, and I took from that and said, no, you don't have to die. You can get out. There are safe places. There's not many, and there's specific ways that we have to do this. But we can escape. We can get out. We can have our freedom. We can return ourselves from being reduced to cattle to being human beings again. And that's what I do. That's what I focus on. That's what I have done for the last 11 years.
And you do it just to help them as a... Do you charge for it?
Oh, I would be if I went back to Canada. Oh yeah, like they won't give me my passport. They're trying to get me to go back. I won't do it. I'm not an idiot. I don't care if, you know, I'm a countryless woman technically in the world. I really don't care.
I'm trying to understand, how do these people who need your help know about you? How do they contact you?
Oh, how do they find me? Yeah. I'm known. I'm well known.
And do you charge them for your help?
No. Oh God, no. No. Absolutely not.
So it's just free to help people in your state?
Yep.
I see. Okay. Yep. So what would you like?
I'm up for the next 3 days. Sorry?
Sorry, the next 3 days?
Whether I'm up for the next 3 days helping grandparents finish an affidavit so they can get their grandchild returned, or, you know, helping them find flights, or talking them through what they need to do, giving them support at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're losing hope, you know, and they're not sure, like, I don't know if I could do this anymore. Like, I don't charge for a damn thing. I wish I had someone like me when I was going through this. And so I look at it this way, Michael, I'm glad I'm still alive. Because I'm still alive, I'm still able to do this. And that's a gift. That's a gift.
Definitely.
And so I'm just grateful that I can.
So what would you like? Do you need any help? Would you like people, if people wanted to help you, is there something they could do to help?
You know, storm the family courts. Force them to be public. Storm them. It's the only thing that's going to make us have our humanity back. One case that I'll quickly talk about, and I'm going to identify her. There's a woman named Kim Gray. She is quote unquote a adoption practitioner and a social worker that works in the neonatal unit at the London Health Science Centre in London, Ontario. That is a hospital, okay? That is in London. I know of numerous innocent young single mothers that she made reports to the Children's Aid Society without consent, okay, about these mothers that were drug-free, alcohol-free, having babies, okay? She has worked there for at least 26 years, okay? I know of one family that managed to get their child back, one, after making it to trial. And like I said to you earlier, for every one child that gets returned, 50 don't. Those are the statistics. Those are the numbers. Okay?
Yeah.
That woman has made a hell of a lot of money. The only way that we can get our rights back is if Canadians in these first world countries, Canadians, Americans, Britons, everybody, storm those family courts. Get 200, 300 of you together daily. Walk into those courtrooms, sit your asses down, and do not move. You know what's going to happen? They're going to close down because they will not continue these actions. They will not continue these crimes against your neighbors, against your community, against the children and the mothers in your area if there's people there to watch. And they don't have the ability to arrest 200 or 300 of you at a time. They don't. Go to your family courts now. Right now, it's very scary because COVID has shut everything down, okay? But those courts are still open. Bust in there. Take those friggin' documents. Take those case files. Take them to an actual, what do they call them? They're like accountants. But they're people that can review documents and find, what do they call them? Forensic analysis, okay? Take them to those people, okay? And get these documents. You're going to see how many babies Kim Gray, for example, has stolen from innocent mothers. You're going to see so many of these.
But how can you just walk into court and take... But are you serious? You want people to storm the court and just take the files?
If hundreds of you go, they can't stop you. They can't.
Well, you literally mean we should storm the court and forcefully take the documents?
Yes. I know it sounds crazy, but I have done everything else. The only other thing I can think of, Michael, is people stop paying their taxes. Their taxes fund these organizations. Okay, I have been screaming to people. My new hashtag is "You are complicit," not you specifically. Okay, but Canadian taxpayers, American taxpayers, British taxpayers, they are complicit because their tax money goes towards paying to traffic us. It doesn't faze them at all, at all. And I have organized so many protests and rallies, okay? They were actually undermined by a government official in Ontario. Her name is Andrea Horvath. She's the leader of the NDP party. She got leader of the NDP party because she stopped the 3 or 4 years of protesting that I had organized from Mexico, okay? Parents were supporting each other outside of their hearings. And at first, it only started with 3 parents. It grew to 50, 60 parents. In Ottawa, they had an empty stroller protest. and there was all these people walking up and down the road with empty strollers, and they were protesting babies being kidnapped out of the hospitals, okay? Even if I got all of us together, we're still nothing more but a big bunch of vulnerable people. That's why they target us. We can't do this alone. We've done everything. There is nothing left. The only thing that we need is we need the people who aren't vulnerable to stand up for us. We need them to demand, like, to stop this physically. They make too much money. I don't vote, and I haven't voted in years because I know it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what party gets in. They just brush us under the rug. We make them too much money. We're too much of a business. Yeah. And like, I can't think of, I swear, I have racked my brain. I have done everything, including I've gone through the system. I've done everything. I'm in the Hansards at Queen's Park. Okay. I have stopped bills from going through. It doesn't matter. They still get the laws passed later anyway. I mean, no matter what I do, they just go and undo it. You know, they just go and undermine it. And so many parents have spoken out. So many parents have. There's a documentary which I don't really like because the woman blanked out too many people's faces, and making us anonymous, reducing us to initials is what makes it so easy for them to traffic us. Okay? People are going to be able to connect with me because I don't care anymore. Go ahead, try and put me in jail. People need to know I'm a real person. I'm a real mother, and people should be asking about us. People should be asking where these babies and where these children's mothers are, and if we have support. What's being done to help us? What's being done? You know what I mean? Like, we are an important part of this. We shouldn't be thrown away. We shouldn't be discounted. We shouldn't be stereotyped as drug addicts or whatever, because in most cases, it's wrong. It's not true. They don't want those kids because those kids are too much money. Those kids are going to be too much problems. They target vulnerable, low-income, innocent families more than anything else. And we can't defend ourselves. Like, I have literally racked my brains. The only thing I can think of is if they storm the courts and force them to be public, which right now they can't do because everything's closed with COVID. So the only other thing I can do is, if people want to do it right now, is go get those files. Go get those documents. Get them analyzed by a forensic team. Get them checked over. They'll see how many children are trafficked. They'll see. Then maybe these people can be charged under the criminal courts. I don't see any other way. I wish, but I really don't. But if we can't do it, we've done everything, everything. 17 years I've been fighting this. Yeah. 17 years.
Okay, well, your email has been shown above you a few times throughout the video, the Yahoo one. So can people contact you on that email if they need more information?
They can contact me, yes, most definitely. Most definitely.
Okay.
Most definitely. I'm available. I have an open door policy. I'm here to help in any which way I can.
That's amazing. So
and
look,
maybe we can get an army of non-victims together. You know what I mean? Maybe.
I'm just thinking maybe people who get to see this and identify with it, and maybe it kind of clicks and they kind of connect the dots in a way. They might, contact you and then see what to do, and perhaps you could guide them. Or
I hope so. And I also want to say one thing. What is going on with COVID? Okay, like everything that I've explained to you about the risk laws, right? Risk of harm, risk of abuse, risk of neglect, risk of failing to provide for, all of these things, okay, is the exact same thing as COVID. What are they telling you to do? Wear a mask because you might get someone sick. Close your business because it might get someone sick. Isolate and torture. I'm adding the torture part, but isolate your elderly because you might get them sick. It's all may, might, maybe, risk. And the reasons why they're doing this is because you can't defend yourself against it. There's no facts, right? Once you bring in the facts, then you can make choices. Then you can defend yourself. Then you can actually say, no, I am essential. Feeding my children is essential. But they keep using all of this risk. Public health is just borrowing a page from the Children's Aid Society and their international ring, because that's what they are. They're an international ring, okay? And I don't care what their name is, they're all linked together. Because when you see one organization get laws that benefit them and take more rights away, they all get it. That's how you know that they are a ring. But all public health is doing is borrowing that page. We can't defend ourselves against it. And now they're punishing society the exact same way. Stay home. You may be sick. Wear a mask. You may be sick. You might get someone sick. You might kill someone. You may. How do you fight that? I'm living proof that you can't. I've tried. I've done it all. You know what I mean? So this is what public health is doing. Now, I'm hoping because the courts that these things have to go in front of are not closed courts. They're not like family court, right? It's not done behind secret doors where you're threatened. Yes, people may lose their jobs for speaking out, okay? And I admire all of those doctors, nurses, scientists, all of those professionals. Like, believe me when I say I can identify with them completely, okay? But people need to get these into the courts because the courts in that system is very different than family court. Family court, they punish us because there is no witnesses. They can bowl us over. We can go to court. I brought one of Canada's 100 most powerful women to me once to one of my hearings, okay? Like, that's how resourceful I am, Michael. I brought Kay Blair, who was one of Canada's 100 most powerful women. She won that year. I brought her to one of my hearings, okay? And it does nothing. They just shut them out, shut them out, shut them out. They can't do that in these public courts where you're going to be able to take these illegal draconian laws to court. Get them to court. File individually. Do not go with a class action. Class actions are the easiest of all legal actions to undermine. And I'll tell you how. Let's say you have 15 people in a class action. All they need is one savvy lawyer to come and convince one person to change their minds and want to go in another direction, and the entire class action falls apart. I can't stand class actions. They do nothing for victims. I always tell victims when they say, oh, there's a class action, we're going to sue the CAS. I tell them, no. What you do is you file in court, and there is a thing called intervener status. Anybody who is affected by this law that you're suing or that you're challenging in court, which is all of society, okay, they can intervene on behalf of this person, okay? And so you can literally, this can be bigger than the Canadian Red Cross blood scandal, okay? If you get a crap ton of people to intervene, that's a big wave. And that is a wave that they can't stop. They can't manipulate it. They can't undermine it because the person filing the case, they are the one that would have to settle. They are the one. It would depend on that one person, okay? So it's a lot harder for them to undermine. But get these things into real courts. You have a chance. We didn't. You do. Get these things before the courts. Challenge the human rights violations. Challenge the constitutional laws.
So you mean a person who is not vulnerable and just wants to help has to go and file that action without having a child being taken away from them or anything? It could be anyone.
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, this is only talking with the public health stuff. This is only talking with the COVID things because it affects them. Someone who hasn't had their child taken can't go and file in court about this. Okay. But someone who has had their business closed based on risk. Okay. Someone who has lost their job based on risk. Okay. So an elderly person who is isolated and locked up in a long-term care facility, okay, based on risk.
So
they can all file.
So they can file So what would that be? So a person, an old person could
It'd be
claim...
a constitutional challenge based on constitutional violations. Okay, because all of these
Okay, so basically,
bylaws that they
the humans' rights violations based on a what if you might get a disease that, you know, there's no proof that it even exists, but that's a different story. You basically take the whole corona scam to court.
Take it to court. Exactly. You guys have open courts. You have the benefit that we don't. We have closed courts. You have open courts. They're trying the same tactics that they use on us, but you have the benefit of taking these to open public courts. Now, I don't know if you heard about the court case out of Portugal, but there was 2 German tourists that were held against their will. 3, sorry. One of them tested positive with the highly unreliable PCR test, okay? And because he tested positive, the other 2 people that were traveling with him were deemed as contacts, and they were all held against their will for 2 weeks, okay? The German tourists sued the Portuguese government for it, okay? The courts fully tested. Now, again, these are open courts, very different than family court, okay? These open courts tested these PCR tests, and not only in the first court, but also in the appeals court, they backed it up that they are 97% unreliable. It has nothing to do with manufacturing. It has to do with how much they are magnifying it, the cycles that they are running it by.
Yep.
Okay. Most people are running it by 35 cycles and higher. And what that means is any coronavirus that you've had over your entire life, okay, just a small piece of it needs to pick up, and it's going to show you as positive. These PCR tests are only for coronavirus. They are not for COVID-19. Any coronavirus can set these things off. Now, what the Portuguese court determined is not only are they 90% junk, but they cannot replace a doctor. Only a doctor can diagnose you with a disease. And also keep in mind, this coronavirus, this COVID-19, everybody keeps calling it, it's a tactic, okay? So you can't look stuff up. It's called SARS-CoV-2. SARS, I lived through the first one. We had the first outbreak in Toronto back in 2002, 2003. I survived by it. There was no lockdown. There was no crazy thing. They actually handled it the proper public health way, okay, which was contact tracing. And you know what I mean? It was done properly. There was no shutting down all of society. They have learned so much about it. But I want to explain what SARS means. Severe acute respiratory syndrome. Syndrome is the key word. There are no tests that can diagnose a syndrome. Only a doctor. That's why it's called syndrome. That's what syndrome means. People can look this up in a dictionary. Syndrome. That's why they're calling it COVID. They don't want you to know it's a syndrome because they want you to believe they can shove this torturous device way up your nose and then deem you as positive. Okay. And what the Portuguese courts determined is that these tests cannot replace a doctor. Mm-hmm. They cannot diagnose you with a syndrome.
That's clear. I know there are some. There are some lawyers that are taking this to the High Court. I know in Israel and other countries. I don't know how successful it is, but I know this information that you're talking about. It is. I'm aware of it personally, and I don't know how successful people were in doing it. And so.
Well, I know in Canada, for example, nobody's been able to get it through. People have been ticketed, okay? That's as far as they've gone, is they've ticketed people. And the justice of the peace is just throw them out. They don't go anywhere. They don't actually get their day in court. They're just throwing them out because they're illegitimate. They're not legal. They can't back them up, right? So you get a ticket, you go and appear, and it's just tossed out. That doesn't actually do anything because it doesn't challenge the laws, right? But people who have had their businesses shut down, they can actually sue. They don't have to settle. They can take this all the way, okay? People that have been held against their will, they can sue. They don't have to settle. They can take this all the way, right? So there's specific cases. The partner that I told you about, who to this day still has documents that are published online identifying the mother and her children, she's a paralegal. In Canada, she has filed what is called a judicial review. A judicial review is any time a government makes a decision, okay, you can have it reviewed by a judge whether or not it is legal. Now, she filed this last year. They're still trying to push it through the courts. It's going to take a while. But if everybody that qualifies, you don't even have to have a lawyer, okay? Everybody that qualifies, go and flood the courts. Pay the $100 fee, the $75 fee, whatever the fee is. Write up an affidavit. An affidavit is just paragraphs that you swear to that are the facts, okay? That's all it is. My name is so-and-so, paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, I am the owner of this business at this location at this address. Paragraph 3, the government has shut down my business based on da-da-da-da-da. Paragraph 4, I have an estimate loss of this amount of money. Paragraph 5, okay? And that's what I mean. That's an affidavit.
Yeah.
Affidavits are super simple to write, but everybody can do this. Everybody can go and file.
So every business
Eventually,
owner,
the courts are gonna say,
imagine if every business owner in Israel or in London or in Paris did that and sent it to their local court, then
yep.
But the court could just dismiss.
They're going to have to hear you. They're going to have. They can't put you off.
So I have to come. Then I could come to court and say, look, there's no reason for the lockdown because there's the PCR is 97% inaccurate, and the government had no right to do what they did, and therefore I want to sue them for damages.
That's right.
That's so simple. That's actually the simplest thing ever.
Going to get through. Eventually, one of you is going to get through, right? And the courts, now, if it's only 1 or 2 lawyers here, 1 or 2 lawyers there, well, you know, there's a bit of a game that they can play, okay? When there's thousands of you filing,
and no class action, you say do it separately. Separately.
Right. You know, class actions. Do not do a class action. They will manipulate it. They will undermine it, and you're screwed.
Yeah.
Okay. Do it individually. Okay. Go file. I mean, if every court tomorrow started getting 100 affidavits a day or 100 like court filings per day, guess what? They're going to crap themselves.
Do you have an example of it? Could you write the affidavit and we could add it to this in the, you know, below the video?
I can.
And whoever wants, we can get it translated to different languages.
I can do that. I can do that. I've done them for family court. I absolutely can do it for this.
Let's try it.
Okay?
Let's try it.
It's going to take me a couple of weeks because I want to make sure I have all of the stuff in there. But good. I will do that, Michael. And that's another thing. If anybody out there wants to help me with this, contact me, email me. If you've got evidence, if you have a court ruling, if you want to help, if you're word savvy, if you're legal savvy, I don't care if you're a lawyer. Man, people get much further self-representing. If you want to help me put this document together, we can do it on Google Drive. And I work amazingly on Google Drive. I've done so many things with people across the world, okay? We can do this on Google Drive. Nobody can delete it. Nobody can erase it. It's there. I will have ultimate control to make sure that this thing doesn't get undermined, and we will get this out and into people's hands so they can file. Oh, yeah, Michael, you rock.
Excellent. Let's do it. We had to talk for 3 hours
for sure.
to do the simplest thing ever. So now it's the next move is your move. So I'll be waiting for that document, and hopefully people will contact you. Maybe they'll contact me. Maybe they'll write stuff, and we could get this thing rocking.
Yeah, and I know you know a lot of people too. So if you can think of anybody that may help, connect us. Brilliant. I love networking. I love, like we put our minds together, we can be the change.
Amazing.
We can. I believe in it. That's why I still stand up. That's why I still fight. I haven't bent over. I haven't hidden in a corner. I'm technically safe. Okay. I'm technically free now of the child trafficking crap. You know what I mean? But I just haven't hidden in a corner because I know there's got to be a way.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way. And with this coronavirus stuff, it's even easier because you're in public courts. You're in open courts.
Amazing.
You're not.
I see what you mean now.
You know, so
yeah.
we can do this.
Yeah.
We can do this.
Definitely. Okay. So, wow. Pamela Palmer. What a long, interesting discussion we had here. You know, thank you very much for sharing, you know, your personal story with us and all this amazing information that you've given us. And hopefully we could do something good with this situation we're all in. We're all in jail in a way
and
right
I want
now.
to tell you too, there's a lot of mothers that can't wait for this to come out. I asked them if I could tell their stories and things like that. And they are absolutely so happy because, like I said, media back home won't cover this stuff because they get pummeled right away. They get filed in the courts against the Children's Aid Society with the gag laws. And so you're giving legitimacy to their suffering and to the plights and the extreme steps that they've had to take in order to protect their children. So they want me to thank you too for giving us this opportunity.
Pleasure.
We appreciate it greatly.
Absolute pleasure. Okay, so have a lovely day in Mexico.
You too.
And we'll stay in touch. Thank you so much.
Viva Mexico. Gracias.
Gracias. So thank you very much for watching. And this was a long episode. And we will be back soon with the next one. Bye-bye.